Hello and welcome to the David 67 Thursday the 30th of July Celtic fan live stream. Sorry for the wee slight delay getting us going today. Lots and lots of people already making comments. Good evening to you. Hail, hail, Paul Maguire. Good evening to you as well, Gary Simpson. Hopefully going to be a good Thursday evening going into Friday morning with chat. Good evening to you as well, David67. I was just simply putting together one or two little slides type things for this evening's live stream. I wasn't doing anything other than that. Hail, hail to you, and hail, hail to everybody. And as Slabbering Cabbage is pointing out, we're still champions of the league. We'll be champions of the league in Scotland right through to next May at the very least. And I'm very, very confident that with the addition of Kasper Hogh and Hogh Duran, that we're on course for another title, another double or treble. Obviously, a few more signings would greatly help that, and also keeping hold of as many as possible of our current players. Good evening to you as well, Sligo Boy. Nice to have you on. Hail, hail, Rubber Duck. Good evening to you as well. Hail, hail, John Quinn. Evening, James Smith as well. And hail, hails, Who the Snitch as well. So lots of long-standing David 67 channel people, lots of new names as well. Great to have you on. As I said, obviously over the week since the last live stream, we've made a very, very big, important signing. We've brought in Kasper Hogh, or Hogh, or Hogh. It's difficult to exactly get the exact pronunciation of his name. Either way, no matter how we pronounce his name, I think we've got a really good addition to Celtic's striking options. It was one of the glaring things about last year's season was partly creating chances for people, but also largely putting chances away. According to the statisticians, Celtic missed what were called big chances, or big chances. In essence, it's a one-on-one between the striker or the attacker and the goalkeeper, where there's nobody there to block the shot. There's nobody really to stop the player scoring, apart from the goalkeeper. So really, in essence, it's where an attacking player has a free shot at goal. So Celtic had between 40 and 50 big chances missed last season, which was quite a big upgrade on the previous season. Players like Maeda missed well over 20 big chances last season. Johnny Kenny, in about half the season, missed 10 plus big chances. Kelechi Iheanacho, a similar number. Thomas Chavanchara missed half a dozen chances in the games that he played for Celtic. So clearly, if Celtic do have a goal-scoring option in Kasper Hogh and Hogh Duran, both of whom tend to put away 1 in every 5 chances they get. So a goal conversion rate of 20%. It does augur well for Celtic, assuming that we do get people in to give them service. So last season, our chance creation was also a bit down. Hail, hail to you as well. Wyoming CSC. So your question there, Camilo, can Duran play on the wing? Duran last season in Azerbaijani football for Karabakh, half the season he played out wide and half the season he played through the middle. He played through the middle in all of the Champions League games that Karabakh had last season, but played out wide generally. More often than not, he played out wide in the league games for Karabakh, but played through the middle in the European games. So very much he can play right wing, left wing. He's more of a He's a left-footed player, obviously, because from what we've seen of him, he does tend to play a bit more down the right, but can play down the left. He could play as a second striker. He could play as an attacking midfielder type of person behind Kasper Hogh up front. Good evening as well, Michael Ross. Ross, nice to have you on. Nice that you're full of compliments that the podcast is the best ever. I'm not sure that's the case, but it's really nice to get compliments from time to time. Paul Maguire, in his interview, should have asked him, "How do you pronounce your name?" Yes, he did. He did give the interviewer a wee bit of compliments about getting close to pronouncing his name, but didn't actually properly give us a guide of how to say his name. I've tried to check online how to say his surname properly, and there seem to be about 2 or 3 different versions of how to say his name properly. It's a bit like, it sounds a bit more like Hogh, except the end part is supposed to be quite soft rather than hard. Anyway, hopefully, once we start hearing the various different commentators saying his name, such as in next Monday's game, we'll get a better chance to know how to say his name. James Smith saying, "If I'm honest, don't want Duran on the wing because that will let the board off signing a winger." I think James Smith, it's a good point. I think from Martin O'Neill's comments, it does sound like he's thinking about playing 2 up top, either as a starting formation or swapping to that given the game circumstances. I think Celtic, if we keep the squad that we've got, we do have actually quite a lot of options for playing 4-4-2, a 3-5-2, a 5-3-2. Players like Johnston and Tierney, especially, are both good at playing conventional fullback, inverted fullback, wing backs. If worst came to the worst, you could have Johnston and Tierney actually as quite mobile right-sided and left-sided centre-backs with Carter Vickers or Trusty or Scales in the middle. So I think there actually are quite a lot of options. However, coming to that, I think starting using Duran a bit like the way that we use Dyes and Maida, i.e. a wide player who also plays centrally. I think given the fact we've got Kasper Hogh in the side, or it does probably mean that Duran sometimes will play out wide, sometimes plays a second striker, sometimes he'll start the game with Kasper on the bench. I think it does give Celtic a lot of different options. However, the indications are that Celtic are still intensely negotiating for Hassiem Hassan of Real Oviedo. From a few sources, they were saying that a deal for Hassan could be done in the next 48 hours, that the 2 clubs are actually very close to coming to a conclusion. So I don't think if we did play Duran as a wide player, that would mean that we weren't looking for any more wide players. I think we still are looking for 1, if not 2 wide players. Using players like Haring and Chineke as backups. Obviously, if all goes well with Jota, he should be back into first team contention around about November. So, in essence, if he does come back fit, that will be like having a new player. So, I do, from all the stories, it does look like Celtic are looking for it 1, if not two wide players. So Patrick Berry, good question. Hi David, do you think we'll buy any more players, or are we waiting to see who we sell before we buy? We need another 5 players. Now, my guess is that Celtic, probably having bought Duran and Kasper Hogh, think that their striking replacements are probably done. Given the fact we actually do at this point have 2 very talented young backups, Callum Osmond, Johnny Kenny. Johnny Kenny may or may not be leaving the club. But I think probably Celtic can be quite confident they've got 2 very high quality strikers, capable of scoring tons of goals in Scotland, capable of scoring goals in Europe. They both scored 5 for Duran, 6 for Hogh last season in Europe. So I think that's settled. Definitely Celtic need one player in terms of a backup goalkeeper to Vogliami Sinisalo. Whether we go with Sinisalo as the number 1 or Sinisalo as the number 2, we definitely need someone better than Duran as the backup goalkeeper. All it takes is one injury or one suspension, and I don't have confidence with Duran being Celtic's number 1 goalkeeper and an academy player being the backup player after that, off the bench for goalkeeping. I think Celtic do need to get a left back in, and we can come back to talk about that in later on in the live stream. I think we do need to have one, if not 2, midfielders, probably more if Engels or Hatate or both of them leave. And I do think we need to have 1 or 2 other options with wide players, maybe just the one, given the fact Duran can play different roles, and given the fact that in about 3 months' time, we should have Jota back fit, a month or 2 of him regaining his full match fitness, having got back into proper fitness around about October, November, and going into 2027. If Jota gets back to fitness, we've got a really, really good wide player, and hopefully 2 or 3 other new wide players. So I think Celtic will be continuing to look at players and bring in players. I think bringing in Hassan, bringing in Baur is definitely something they're planning in the next few days. I think they've been planning that for the last week, 10 days, but Oviedo and Paderborn are both playing hard to get in terms of transfer deals. Being forgot, we've got no quick forward-thinking midfielders. I think that would be the benefit of having Mika Baur. He does have those different options. I do agree that with what we've got at the moment, McGregor and Hatate and Engels, they're all at the club. We've got backups with Bernardo and McCowan. We certainly could do with a genuine box-to-box midfielder. A player like Hatate can do that. A player like Engels can do that. So maybe if they were freed up to do that, that would happen. However, there are a lot of stories to suggest that in the next 4 weeks or so, one or both of them will be leaving the clubs. Although we've been saying that all summer, that Hatate was leaving and Engels was leaving, but nobody as yet has put in a proper bid for either of them. No one seems to have actually put in a bid for either of those. Tripper 67 raising another question. A lot of speculation that Everton are going to bid for Alistair Johnston, talking about a bid of 10 million or 15 million, given the fact that Johnston's under contract till 2029, so he's got 3 years left in his contract. Celtic are under absolutely no pressure or obligation or need to sell Alistair Johnston. Can't see there being any possibility except for anything less than 25 million. And I think Celtic have got the financial capacity to say no to any offer for Alistair Johnston, with him being 3 years left in his contract. Obviously, when a player is less than 12 months in the contract, as was the case with Maeda, it's more difficult to say no to offers. Engels and Hatate, they're both actually under contract till 2028. So in theory, Celtic could say no to both of them. However, I think Hatate wants to move out. Yes, Port Job Express. Duran online profile saying he can play along the front 3, right side, left side, midfield, centre forward, second striker. He's a super player. Kasper Hogh, a bit more just a classical centre forward. Tends to be a centre forward that does most of his work in the box, in the 18-yard box. Duran able to come strike from deeper, run at defences, etc. So I do think we've got a lot of options up front. Sligo Boy saying, when I saw Kasper ghosting through the door, my spirits were lifted. Well, I think he certainly is. He is a breath of fresh air at the club. Chipper 67, this boy Hatton might get a few sniffs at the first team. Yep, I think he's one of the probably about the of all the young players who played in the pre-season friendlies. I think Hatton's the one that really pushed himself forward. He is capable on the ball. He's confident using the ball. Drives at players. Good speed. Good ability to dribble and shoot and so on. I think he's got a lot of talent. He probably needs one season playing for Wraith Rovers or Motherwell or St Mirren or Livingston or St Johnstone. I think he probably needs a year of regular week in, week out first team action before he's ready for Celtic first team. I don't think he's quite got the skills that at his young age that would allow a player like Tierney, who could come straight into the side, or Dalglish or McStay or Nicholas or McGrain, or all those players who came into the club, into the first team as teenagers. Don't think he's quite that good. But I do think maybe like McGregor or Christie or Scales, a year of playing first team football away on loan at a good quality side, then would have him ready for first team action for Celtic. Gary Simpson saying we need 2 wingers minimum as Chinecki is rotten. I think Chinecki has got the capacity. He showed last season in spells that he does actually have a lot of good ability on the ball, good ability to shoot, to create chances. However, he was rather inconsistent. Some good games, some rubbish games, some very poor games. For me, one of the reasons that Chinecki maybe didn't deliver quite 100% in his first season was the fact that he'd come from a full season in Sweden without a break straight into the Celtic team. Didn't have a month off between one league ending and the Celtic league starting, like is usually the case with transfers. He also has, given the fact he's a Tunisian international, he a lot more jet set traveling with international games back and forward to Africa, all around Africa, etc. So I do think that Chinecki, partly due to fatigue, partly due to playing a very large number of games in Swedish football, then into Scottish football with international football as well, probably struggled a bit like Nicholas Kuhn struggled for his first 6 months at Celtic and then really came good in his second season. Hail to you, Paul McCune. Lots of very positive vibes coming from your emojis there. Chipper 77, is this German boy coming? Well, certainly, if we're talking about Mika Baur, the indications are that Mika Baur is desperate to come to Celtic. He's already got his contract and clauses, etc., all ironed out with Celtic. Celtic have reportedly put in a bid of equivalent of £4 million, which was Paderborn's original asking price. Paderborn now seem to want £5 million. And then I think the what's going on at the moment is negotiations over what's the basic fee, what's the add-ons, what's the clauses for Mika Baur. But I would expect in the next 3 to 5 days that Mika Baur will be coming in. But that's just kind of reading all the rumours, reading the stories. What is for definite is that Mika Baur was supposed to play for Paderborn in a pre-season friendly on Wednesday against Southampton, but was pulled out due to a cold. That's very similar to what happened with Kasper Hogh playing for Bodo Glimt. He was pulled out and put on the bench, and then a couple of days later he was coming into Celtic. And it's very, very clear that Mika Baur doesn't want to play for Paderborn anymore, and he may just force Paderborn's hand to take the deal and move on. Jumpers at the 7th saying for Chinecki will provide 20 assists and score 10 this year. If he did, that would be absolutely brilliant. That's obviously about 4 or 5 more goals than he got last season, a lot more assists than he got last season. I think he's got the capacity, he's got all the skills. And I think if he does settle down into Celtic life, does get that, just gets more used to his role at Celtic. I think things might be a bit more better defined this season, with obviously Daizen Maeda being away. That opens up a definite berth for somebody on the left wing. He can play right side, can play left side. And as I said, I fully expect Celtic to get somebody in the very near future to play wide on the other side. We've got Camilo Duran, who's got that capacity to play right, left, and through the middle. Alison Timoney, you want saying, I want to keep AG temper tantrum incoming. I don't see Celtic selling Alistair Johnston unless Alistair Johnston is absolutely desperate to leave Celtic. He's not really, from what I've seen, made any kind of rumblings or indications that he wants to leave Celtic. Whenever he's been interviewed, he's talked about how happy he is at Celtic, how happy his wife is living in Scotland, having lived in America and Canada before that. He talks about his ties to the clubs, the fact his family are all lifelong Celtic fans that used to get up in the middle of the night to watch games live from Scotland on Canadian TV. So I think the only reason for Celtic selling Alistair Johnston would be that they got a bid upwards of 25 million to 30 million for him, and Johnston wants to leave Celtic, the same way that was the case with Arne Engels, although nobody's bid that much. So James Smith saying we need a number 6 and a right-footed centre-back, 2 wingers, a goalkeeper, a left-back. But please, no Taylor. There's better out there at the moment. 2 midfielders with Engels and Nygren goal. Then we need more. I don't see Benjamin Nygren leaving the club, simply because I don't think his World Cup pushed him forward, which obviously is the opposite of Alistair Johnston, who had a really good World Cup. I think Nygren's limitations were shown in the World Cup, that he's a bit of a luxury player and that he doesn't battle much in midfield. He does tend to ghost in and out of games. So I don't see Nygren going. As I said, with all the speculation that all these Celtic players were leaving, but the only one that's actually left of what would be Celtic's first team players is Daizen Maeda. And I think, given the fact he was in the last year of his contract and he'd been promised to leave the year before, that probably was completely unavoidable. Wyoming CSC, guess Rojo would be the obvious choice if AJ goes. Yes, so as I mentioned in a video I did a wee bit earlier on today, the story with Julian Rojo is that he's decided to stay at Bournemouth at the moment, fight for his place in the pre-season training and pre-season games with Bournemouth. Now, it may be that when Bournemouth actually get back into English Premier League action, that Rojo has backed down to number 2 and number 3 right back at Bournemouth, in which case I think then coming towards the end of the transfer window, there would be an option for Celtic to bring Rojo to the club, either as the new Alistair Johnston or possibly as a backup, an alternative to using Johnston. I think there actually would be room for both Johnston and Rojo in the same side, given the fact that Rojo is capable, very capably able to play right side midfield in front of a back 4. David Connor, hello David, hope you're well. Not too bad, thank you. Not been on for a while. I completely agree that Kasper Hogh is a brilliant signing for Celtic. £11 million with another 1 million in add-ons and clauses if he scores plenty of goals for Celtic, which I fully expect he will do. I think it's a really good signing. I think it's a very ambitious signing. Kasper Hogh chose to come to Celtic. He had a few other possible options of other clubs looking at him in England and in Central Europe, but he made a conscious decision to come to Celtic, which I think is a very good thing for Celtic. And I think he will be a very successful player at Celtic, assuming that we get him the ball in the box. Kieran Allen, yep. Hibs are cruising. When I last looked at halftime, they were 3-0 up, which obviously puts them through on aggregate if they hold that on to the end. And I think Motherwell won 3-0 away from home in the Faroe Islands, so both of them are through to the next. Well, Hibs, assuming that they carry on with that lead, will be through to the next round. Motherwell already through to the next round. That's good. Hearts obviously got completely gubbed by Sturm Graz home and away, so they're dropping into Europa League qualifiers, where they'll go alongside Rangers. I think if they both lose their Europa League qualifiers, they then drop into Conference League qualifiers. So we could end up with 4 Scottish clubs through into the Conference League and Celtic in the Champions League. Slago Boy saying, I'd like a Rojo regardless. Parent club want him re-loaned out, but to European club, despite Mexican and MLS interest. My understanding from reading stories was that Rojo decided not to go back to play in Mexico or play in America, and it's chosen to stay in Europe, primarily staying at Bournemouth, and then looking at his options depending on how things work out for him in the pre-season training. So I think there's a possibility that Rojo could come back to Celtic. I think you could actually have Rojo and Johnson in the same squad, much the same as we did with Sirachi and Tierney on the other side. But coming back to the point someone was making earlier on, I think a backup left back is very, very important for Celtic, and there seems to be a sort of split opinion as to whether Greg Taylor would be a good idea or a bad idea. The benefit of Greg Taylor over a few of the other options is that Greg Taylor is Scottish. He's Scottish trained, which does help Celtic with the 8 homegrown or Scottish trained players that you have to have in every 25-man European squad. So so that would be of benefit, with the fact that Greg Taylor is Scottish trained. He obviously knows Celtic club in and out, inside and out. He played over 200 games for Celtic. He was, I thought, a good player for Celtic going forwards. Not a very good defender for Celtic. 5'7", so he was small in terms of defending corners and free kicks, etc. Wasn't always the best in positions as well. Paul Maguire saying, yep, that Baur pulled out a friendly with Southampton, saying he had the flu. It was the club that said he had the flu. Baur doesn't appear actually to have said anything in the press about why he did or didn't play, but Paderborn said that he had a cold and that's why he was pulled out. People can get colds obviously in the summertime, but it's not terribly common. Alison Timpany, Alison Johnson is at Celtic. He's in training at Celtic. He was in the crowd for the AC Milan match. So he is at Celtic. He is in training with Celtic. He is in line to start the season against Dundee on Monday. So so Chipper67 saying AG punched Martin O'Neill at training today as he's tried to avoid transfer chat. My granny's a cleaner at Lennox time. Well, maybe that's true. Greenford is saying Murray and Trusty at centre half. Come back, Effie Ambrose. Always forget. I think. Well, I know Austin Trusty's not everybody's cup of tea. I think Austin Trusty is actually a really good centre back. Obviously, he's not a top quality centre back, but I thought he had a pretty decent season playing on the wrong side for him of the defence for 3/4 of last season. I thought actually 2 or 3 of his best games for Celtic last season when he was playing as the left centre-back rather than the right centre-back. I thought he had a brilliant game against Rangers in the game that ended up being a 0-0 draw. He had Dane Murray for half the game beside him and Benjamin Arthur for the other half of the game beside him, because Scales had to play left-back in place of Kieran Tierney. So I think Trusty, if Trusty gets to play as the left centre-back, which he at least will start the season because Scales is suspended. So my guess is for the first couple of games of the season, at least it will be Trusty as left centre-back and Carter Vickers right centre-back. And then depending how Trusty goes, maybe that keeps Scales on the bench. The good thing about Trusty and Scales is they're both very capable left-backs. Not quite got the attacking ability of a Sirachi or a Taylor or a Tierney, but they're both very good. They're both good left backs. Trusty played at left back for America a couple of times in the World Cup just finished. Scales has played left centre back, left side of a three-man defence for Ireland. He played in midfield for Ireland as well a couple of times. So Perry saying Tierney and Taylor would be more than sufficient for left back position. I think in terms of domestic football, I wouldn't have a particular problem with having Tierney and Taylor as our two left backs. I think at European level, I think we could do with an upgrade on Taylor to cover in case Tierney gets injured, Tierney gets tired or whatever. Michael Ross saying the big worry is if someone like Real Madrid comes in for Balikwisha with an offer we can't refuse. I think if anybody came in with an offer for Balikwisha, I think Martin O'Neill and Michael Nicholson and so on would bite off their hand to sell him. There was reports that Balikwisha was one of 3 Celtic players that West Ham were looking to sign in the transfer window, along with Rio Atati and Arnie Engels. That seems to have gone away, not too unexpectedly. Clashman Numpty saying, I wouldn't take Greg Taylor. If we do, we better get rid of the set piece coach and hire a pass back coach instead. One of my big worries with Greg Taylor, as you're pointing out there, is that corner kicks, free kicks, balls into the box, long throws, Taylor is a liability. His defensive ability at those dead ball situations was a major factor for Celtic. So I've put up on the screen a wee poll, a wee sort of voting thing, which hopefully says something along the lines of should Celtics bring Greg Taylor back or not. I'm not sure if this works or not. I just found this on the live stream program. So hopefully that works. So if you are able to vote in that would be great. And then we can see whether that works or not. If it doesn't work, I'll need to do more research into the thing. Oh, good. It obviously works because somebody's voted. That's good. Tone C7U saying 73 minutes, 4-0 to Hibs. That does look like Hibs are going to get through quite comfortably into the next round, which is good for Scottish football, good for Scotland's coefficient in terms of UEFA things. We're down to number 19 in the UEFA league of teams. Good. I've moved the poll thing up to the corner because it was in the way of the text bits. So good evening to you, Kenneth Todd. Lovely to have you on. It's lovely to have 76 people on in the live stream, which is absolutely unbelievable. As I said, when I did my first live stream, it was one person plus me on the live stream. So it's absolutely stupendous. Michael Ross saying, considering Carter Vickers' injury record in the Champions League, do you think we might miss the final? I think if Celtic, I'm confident that Celtic will get through to the next, into the actual group stage. Obviously, we're in the next round of the Champions League. We're in the final qualifiers, but I'm confident that Celtic will get through against any of the 8 possible teams we might get in the draw on Monday. In terms of what we can do once we're in the group stage, I think we can certainly equal what we did a couple of seasons ago and get to the knockout phase. With a bit of luck and a bit of a nice draw, we might get into the last 16. So kind of do the same thing that Karabag and Bodo Glimt did last season as sort of smaller underdog sides. Good evening to you, Dexter R9B, trying to catch up with all these comments. Green for goal, good point. Carter Vickers will get injured along with Trusty, and we'll end up with Scales and Murray at centre-back. Be afraid, be very afraid. Well, it does look like Celtic are trying to bring in a new centre-back. Trusty did have one bout of injury. Actually, once he came back last season after having had a foot problem, he played the rest of the season. Didn't miss a game, having come back, apart from the games he missed, having been suspended with red cards against Hearts and against Hibs. But otherwise, he played every single game of the season after he came back in to replace Carter Vickers. After Carter Vickers did his Achilles tendon, so I don't think Carter Vickers definitely for a couple of years has been very, very injury prone. What the hope would be is that having had his Achilles tendon problem fixed, having had 10 months out of football, that also will allow his knees to settle down and his foot and toe problem to settle down. Quite often, if you have got one injury, it leads into another injury, leads into another injury, leads into another injury. So the hope would be that he's managed to fully rehab from all the various different injuries he's had. Hail to you as well, Steph R. Good point. Actually, Wyoming CSC is one of the things that Scottish football has brought in this summer. A couple of variations and new things with VAR. One of the big things that Scotland's football is going to do is cut down on time wasting, cut down on goalkeepers collapsing with injuries to get tactical timeouts, cutting down on the time wasting that teams can do by having a player injured. That player then has to stay off for 60 seconds. Cutting down on the waiting time to take bye kicks, throw-ins, etc. I think it actually speeds the game up. It prevents one of the ways that a lot of teams frustrated Celtic for the last 2 or 3 years by slowing the game down a lot. Yes, so I think that could benefit Celtic a lot. In the time wasting has always been a major problem for Celtic to have to overcome when teams are dead set on 8-9 men in defence with one striker at halfway line to hold the game up. Clash Bounty, let's be honest, Carter Vickers and McGregor are past their best. Where's the upgrades? I think, we'll need to see how Carter Vickers comes back I think a fully fit Carter Vickers is still a very good centre-back for Celtic. I think the problem is for the last 2 or 3 years, due to all of the injuries he's had, we've not seen the best of Carter Vickers. He's been playing about 80 to 90% fit. He's not been 100% fit. Hopefully this season, having had, as I say, 9-10 months out with injury rehab, he came back into proper squad training around about April time. Although he didn't come back into the match day squad, he actually was training for about 6 weeks as part of the match day squad. He then had the pre-season training. He's come through all those games pretty well. So I do think potentially we have got, if he keeps fit, we could get back to the Carter Vickers we had in these first couple of seasons. Just trying to catch up with all these comments. Pork Chop trying to vote multiple times in the Greg Taylor poll. It does appear to be a pretty strong vote against Greg Taylor. I'll leave the wee poll up there for a bit longer, or the vote up there for a bit longer. As I said, I only just found this facility on the live stream program. It was something I was trying to actually incorporate into the channel. Clashman Umpty Hearts outside the top 6. Mystic Meg sees luck for witty replies and bearded podcasts. Well, certainly Hearts have started the season absolutely terribly. Gubbed by Sturm Graz away from home, gubbed by Sturm Graz at Tynecastle. They looked a real shambles in the game away from home in Austria. Didn't actually see the other game myself. I didn't see the second leg because, in essence, the game was a foregone conclusion after the first leg. But another pretty demoralising defeat for Hearts. Michael Ross making a good point. 7 fails out of 9 in the Champions League qualifiers. Where does the confidence come from? The confidence comes from my eternal optimism about Celtic. I think Celtic, with Martin O'Neill as the manager, with Sean Maloney fathering him, etc., backing him up, I think with the experience that a lot of Celtic's players have had in terms of previous Champions League experience, previously coming through Champions League qualifiers, I think that all stands Celtic in good stead. I think one of the big differences for me this year compared to the last 2 or 3 has been the fact that we've got 2 really good proven goal scorers in Kasper Hogh and Camila Duran. Say between the 2 of them last season, they scored 11 Champions League goals. It's been several seasons since we had a real top quality striker, and I think this season we will have 2 top quality strikers. Whether we play them as 2 men up front, play them as play Duran deeper behind home, or whether we play Duran on the right or the left out wide. So that's one of the reasons I am confident. I'm confident because we'll have a fully fit goalkeeper, a fully fit Carter Vickers, a fully fit Alsa Johnston, Kieran Tierney, who is going to be fitter now than he was this time last year. Particularly if we do keep hold of Arnie Engels, Rio Atati, and bring in a couple of more players between now and that game, the first game, that's why I'm full of hope. But others can have different opinions. So, Gary Simpson, totally agree, mate. We need more quality indoors to even think about qualifying. Well, I think for me, part of that, yes, I think Celtic will have at least 2 or 3 more players by the time of that first Champions League qualifier leg on the 18th or 19th of August. So I do think Celtic will have more quality in by that time. Whether we still have Engels, Hatate, etc. Obviously, still having them as part of the squad would be very, very helpful. As I said, the lack of any kind of progress of any deals for anybody other than Maeda in terms of leading the club gives me some hope that we're going to be able to keep hold of these. Clashman say, do you think the Celtic Board will sanction buying somebody who can actually take a decent and reasonably quick throw-in? I think Celtic have got plenty of players who like to take quick throw-ins. Tierney, Johnston, Yang, Chinecki, Forrest, etc. Part of the difficulty in Scottish football is there's so much time wasting, etc. Also, the fact that there is going to be this new rule that you have to take the throw in within so many seconds that will actually speed up the game a lot. So I do think Celtic have got the players to take quick throw-ins. They've got players to take quick free kicks. I think we can try and get back to some of the skills that we used in the Ange Postecoglou time, and we still actually have a good number of players who played for Postecoglou in one or both of those 2 seasons still at the club. Slagger Boy saying if Celtic get 3 more players, 10 out of 10 for league, 8 out of 10 for treble, and 7 out of 10 Champions League improvement. I thought those actually are very, very reasonable predictions or reasonable odds. I think the addition of 2 proven goal scorers is going to be a big difference between this season and last season. Last season, we kind of cobbled together goals from Maeda, from Nigrin especially. Maeda came good at the end of the season. Iheanacho, when he was fit, came through with goals at the end of the season. Johnny Kenny got a few goals, but missed an absolute mountain of goals. Maeda missed an absolute mountain of goals, particularly in the Wilfred Nancy era of 8 games. Yep, well, I mean CSE. I think Celtic had under Ange Postecoglou, we played quick free kicks, quick corners, quick by kicks, got the ball out quickly to stop the other team getting themselves organised. Under Brendan Rodgers, we seemed to lose the ability to play football quickly, both in terms of restarting games, but also getting the ball forward quickly. O'Neill didn't really get things speeded up much last season, but I think he will get things speeded up this season. Okay. You'd rather have your appendix back than Greg Taylor. Fair enough. The vote seems to be equalising a wee bit between yes and no. Michael Ross, if you know how exactly to say Kasper, whose second name, I've looked up online and there's about 5 different versions of how to say his name. Some of them are suggesting that the way to say his name is much the same as the Scottish Olympic champion cyclist Chris Hogh, but slightly softening the oi bit at the end of his name. I apologise for not being able to say his name properly, but no one seems to be able to say his name properly at the moment, and as yet nobody has properly asked him how to say his name. So Classman Numpty saying not buying Sriracha is more criminal than a very criminally bad thing. My guess is that there's more on that deal falling through than meets the eye. All we've heard so far is basically a one-sided story from Marcello Sriracha's agent. The fact that Sriracha has moved from club to club to club to club to club over his career is a factor. The fact that Sriracha apparently, according to a few different sources, Sriracha didn't really make any efforts to learn English, having joined Celtic. That could also be a factor. One of the things that Camilo Duran has made very clear in his first couple of interviews is the fact that he's taking very regular English lessons to help him fit in at the club. Another player, again, not everybody's favourite, Haiyun Yang, had worked very, very hard on his English language. I do think it actually does really help a player fit in at a new club or a new country if they do work hard to learn the native language. Obviously, it helps in training situations, match situations, helps getting. So Plunge 274 saying Hogh. That could well be the case. I think the end part of his name is supposed to be softer than that, but I dare say within a week or two we'll find out exactly how to say it. Yes, so coming back to Sriracha, yes, I think there's more to that deal than not going through than meets the eye. As is usually the case, Celtic have kept the reasons behind closed doors. He may or may not be going to play for a team in America, for Houston. That's not yet come through. Yes, Plunge 274, just call him Kasper. I think that's the best answer. Yes. So coming back to Sriracha, one of the things that always I find interesting is when you've got a player who's in his mid-late 20s who's played for about nearly 10 different clubs. That was much the same case with Nicholas Kuhn, who played for about 6 or 7 clubs by his mid-20s. Georgios Giacomakis, our ex-centre forward, another player who rarely ever stayed at a club for more than a couple of seasons. Sriracha's moved basically every couple of years from one club to another to another to another. Doesn't seem to have really settled anywhere. Started out in Uruguay, played in Argentina, came across to play for 2 or 3 different European sides, back to Boca Juniors in Argentina, came to Celtic on loan, and maybe or may not be going to Major League Soccer in America. So I always think it's quite significant if a player moves from country to country, from team to team, and doesn't really get settled down anywhere. Yep, Michael Ross, the Great Dane. So yes, so I think with Kasper there will be quite a number of possible nicknames, particularly if he does prove to be as good as we think he's going to be. Yes, Plunge 274. Apparently, Kasper had a very, very emotional saying goodbye to everybody at Bodø Glimt. He had several very good, successful seasons there. Got into international football for Denmark via that as well. Yeah, so Alison Timpany, I do agree. I think one of Celtic's priority positions for me should be backup goalkeeper or a number 2 goalkeeper, because I'd say I don't think Duran is going to be good enough to be Celtic's backup for the season, especially if Duran is having to play. It doesn't mean that one of the very inexperienced academy goalkeepers is going to have to move up to be on the bench. So Kieran Allen, we should bring in some young players. We need to develop more talent. I think there's a balancing act for Celtic. I think Celtic should be looking to bring in a few Scottish players or a few Scottish trained players. I think that does help with the UEFA quotas of having 4+4. That would be, for me, one of the only real good reasons to bring Greg Taylor back would be the fact that he would fulfil that quota. He is a decent left back. I think there are better options, as somebody was saying, and there are better Scottish options than him. Yep, Sparrow from Motherwell plays more right side than left, but there's Longello, who had a good season for Motherwell last season. Those would both be decent options playing down the left side. I'd like to look actually of Will Ferry playing for Dundee United last season. He had a very good season for Dundee United last season. His average rating was 7.49, so very good rating for Dundee United over the course of last season. Scored goals, made assists, defended well, played left midfield, played left back. I think he would actually fulfill quite a few different options for Celtic. I think with his Irish origins, he would be keen to come and play for Celtic. He's out of contract with Dundee United in 10 months' time, 11 months' time, and Dundee United are quite resigned to letting him leave. I think he would be a good signing for Celtic. Again, not a top quality left back, but a very decent backup left back, which would take some of the pressure off Kieran Tierney from having to play 50+ games of the season, and would allow us to use Ferry or Taylor or someone like that in some of the Scottish games to give Tierney a bit of a rest on the left side, or coming on late in the game to replace him for the last 20 minutes. Paddy McGee, Taylor's okay, but he lacks physicality, height, and pace. Ken Costas would rather have Ferry. Yes, I think I would agree with many of those things you're saying. Ferry, a few inches taller, faster, stronger, bigger, more physical, more adaptable as well. Plays 2 or 3 different roles. I thought Taylor was a decent left back going forward when he played for Celtic. Created goals, scored goals. He worked really hard in midfield, but his defensive ability at left back, I thought, was always lacking. So, Plunge saying 274 on the board are not going to spend big money on every position. Loan deals or frees. We'll get a left backer and goalie on loan. Possibly, we might get a goalkeeper on loan. I suspect that a priority for Celtic is a good number 2 goalkeeper to back up or to give Liami Sinisalo a battle for the number 1 spot. There are quite a number of goalkeepers out there that Celtic have been looking at bringing into the club. Dinko Horkas is one of the most obvious examples. That deal seems to have gone away again, having come out, having got stronger again. One of the interesting things is, despite all the supposed interest in Dinko Horkas, nobody else has actually put in a proper bid for him. So we'll see how all that transpires. Kieran Allen, yep, seriously need to get more youth into the squad. It lacks speed. I think speed is one thing that Celtic are short of. Players like Chuneki does have speed, but didn't tend to show it terribly much last season. He seemed to get a wee bit sort of stuck and negative sometimes in his thinking when he did actually try and open up and beat players with speed. He did show a lot of ability, but he did tend to always take the slower inside option, whether that was down to the instructions from Rodgers at the start of the season and then O'Neill later in the season, I don't know. Yes, James Smith, like Baur, Horkas wants the Celtic move. Yeah, it does. That certainly does seem to be what the general consensus of all the various stories is that Horkas is keen to come to Celtic, and much the same that Baur's keen to come to Celtic. Unlike Baur, Horkas hasn't negotiated, as far as we know, his actual contract to come to Celtic. But I do think over the next week, 10 days, that Celtic will get Mika Baur into the club. I've got a strong feeling that we'll get Hassiem Hassan into the club. And I do think we'll get a left back and a goalkeeper into the club. And then additional midfielders probably depends a bit on whether Engels, Hatate leave. Quite what our options are in terms of the more attacking midfield role might depend again on whether anybody takes a risk on buying Nygren. And also one possibility, obviously, is Alistair Johnston leaving the club, although as yet, Everton, to the best of my knowledge, haven't actually put a bid in for him, and it does sound like Everton are trying to lowball things with a £10 million initial offer. As I say, I doubt that Celtic would entertain anything less than 25 to 30 million for Alistair Johnston, given the fact he's got 3 years left in his contract. Sorry, just getting myself another Coca-Cola. Alison Timpany, I'm not sure what I've said that's upset you. I apologise for saying something that's upset you. Alison Timpson, to make my position clear, I don't think Alistair Johnston will be leaving Celtic for 2 seasons at the early. I don't see him leaving this season. He's got 3 years left in his contract. He's made absolutely no indications that he wants to leave Celtic. Unlike Arne Engels, unlike Dyson Maida, unlike Rio Hatate, all of whom have quite clearly said they wanted to leave the club. Benjamin Nygren was a bit 50-50 when he was asked about it during the World Cup. However, Alistair Johnston's always talked about loving Celtic. His whole family loves Celtic. He's so desperate to come to Celtic. He's so happy in Scotland. His wife's very happy in Scotland. His dogs are very happy in Scotland. So he's actually said on multiple occasions he doesn't want to leave Celtic. He doesn't want to leave Scotland. And he's feeling very settled having moved over here from Canada. So I don't see him leaving. So just to make my place clear, I don't see Alistair Johnston leaving. I see him actually possibly being, and for me, he actually would be a very, very good captain for Celtic if and when Callum McGregor retires in the next couple of seasons. I think he is, of all the Celtic players, other than Callum McGregor, he's the best leader on the pitch. Better leader than Tierney, better leader than Scales, better leader than Carter Vickers. I think he is a genuinely very good captain. He's got the mentality to play attacking, aggressive football. He's an intelligent person. He's an eloquent person. I think he has all the skills that Celtic should cultivate to being the official vice captain of the side. At the moment, it's kind of Carter Vickers backed up by Liam Scales. I think Carter Vickers and Scales are both quite quiet people. think Kieran Tierney's another person who could be a very good captain, but he doesn't tend to push himself forward. But I think he would be a very, very good captain for Celtic, backed up by, and I think Johnson for me would be the obvious person to back up Callum McGregor this season as the deputy captain. $18.88 Yvonne G, you know what the greedy board are like if a decent offer comes in. Well, the thing is, if a decent offer comes in, the player can turn down the chance to go to Everton. You know, you don't have to leave Celtic. After all, Celtic over the years had plenty of bids for Callum McGregor, James Forrest, lots and lots of other players, but they chose to stay at Celtic. So a player doesn't have to, if a team wants to buy you, you don't have to leave and play for them. You can say no, you don't want to go to them. But remembering this time last year, Kasper Dolberg was given the chance to come and play for Celtic. Anderlecht were happy to take the bid that Celtic had put in for him. Dolberg said he didn't want to play for Celtic. He wanted to play in a bigger league than Scotland's, and he then ended up playing in the Dutch league. That went rather badly for him. He's now available again. But players can turn down deals. You're not duty bound to leave if the club has accepted a bid for you. Johnny Briggs saying Hassiem Hassan is a different level. Yes, he's a really good. He played very well for Egypt in the World Cup. He had an especially good game against Argentina in the knockout phase. His stats from his last season in Spanish football weren't that great. Particularly was last season he was playing second division football in Spain, but. Plunge 274. If Everton or any English Premier League offer 20 million for Alison Johnson, he's off, I'm afraid. Well, that's a possibility. I don't see that personally. The same way that when Brendan Rodgers went to Leicester all those years ago, reportedly he put in a big bid to take Callum McGregor with him, put a big bid in to take James Forrest down with him. Neither Forrest nor McGregor chose to leave. McGregor, from his interviews just in the last day or two, it would appear that any thoughts of playing in Saudi Arabian football have completely gone. He wants to stay at Celtic. He wants to complete his career at Celtic. So I think my personal opinion is that Johnson's not leaving Celtic, and that if Everton did put in an offer for him, I don't think Johnson would see moving to Everton would be a step up in his career. It's a much better league, obviously. However, Everton, not in European football, no chance of being in European football, I would have thought, for decades to come. Being at Celtic means you've got European football pretty much guaranteed every single year. If things go well in a few weeks' time, Champions League football. I don't see Alison Johnson at his age, his stage of his career, his long Celtic history within his family, that he's going to leave. But who knows? He is a human being. Paul Maguire, Cancellieri looks the part. Hussein deal and the Baur deals are rolling on and on. I completely agree with all those different points. Cancellieri does look a really decent player. An Italian international, wee bit of a up and down career. Just be a second. So Cancellieri is playing for Lazio, 6 foot tall. So he's a decent height. Plays right wing, plays left wing, can play second striker. The asking price for him is 10 to 13 million, which is a bit of a problem. His valuation, according to lots of transfer experts, is 6 million. So Lazio are looking for a lot more money than he's said to be worth. His contract actually runs out in 11 months' time, so it may be that Lazio decide to move him on quicker, despite the fact that they're asking for such a big fee. He's played for Roma, Verona, Empoli, as well as Lazio. Decent goal record in terms of his career, 201 games, 51 goals, 19 assists, so a wee bit on the low side. Good shots per game for a wide player. Pretty decent for big chances missed in a season. Very, very good passing ratings. Accuracy of crossing not so great, but great for tackling back into midfield, winning the ball back, winning the ball in the air, winning the ball on the ground, blocking ball recoveries, etc. So he's got a lot of the skills that Celtic like in a wide player. Lots of energy, adaptable player. Okay, fair enough. Plunge. You got Plunge 274. You got a different opinion that playing against Man City, Arsenal, Man United, Liverpool, Chelsea, rather than playing against St Mirren, Kilmarnock, and earned 3 times his salary, European trophies won't matter. I will find out in the next 5-6 weeks. I think if that was the case, Johnson wouldn't have signed. Wouldn't have signed 2 contract extensions since he came to Celtic. So he's now one of Celtic's better paid players. His contract with Celtic is for 3 years. I don't think a player who's got ambitions and desire to play outside Scotland would have signed a 5-year deal a couple of seasons ago that tied him to the club till 2029. However, we'll find out. All I can do is give my opinion, and obviously I'm like everybody else. I'm just guessing because I'm not in Miles Johnson's head. What I can say is from his interviews, his whole family are Celtic supporters. He and his family got up in the middle of the night to watch Celtic games live on Canadian television. So that does suggest maybe more of a link to Celtic than most players who come to play for Celtic these days. Maybe a similar sort of loyalty to the club that players like Ralston, Forrest, McGregor, Scales all have shown to the club. Johnny Briggs, Ralston needs to go. I think there's a strong argument to say that Anthony Ralston, probably for the sake of his career, should leave Celtic. I think it's good to have an experienced backup to back up Colby Donovan, to back up Alistair Johnston. I would quite like somebody else to back up Alistair Johnston to allow Colby Donovan more of a chance to really come through. Let's see. The benefit of Ralston is the fact that he is Celtic trained, he is Scottish trained, which when it comes to having a 25-man squad for the European games is quite important. So it's a wee bit of a swings and roundabouts type of thing. Ralston, a dependable player, has had some good games for Celtic, scored some good goals for Celtic for the last 2 or 3 years, and seems very, very, very good at keeping himself fit, very, very happy to be on the bench. I think all those things are quite important in terms of a squad game. But I think in terms of his career, his international aspirations, possibly moving to an English Championship club or another European club might be actually better for his career. And I say it might open up things for Colby Donovan, which I think is an important thing with Donovan being 19, 20 years old. I think Donovan's going to get better and better and better with age. Robert Duck 67, Ralston's the best we've got. I'm not convinced that Ralston is the best we've got, but I think he is a decent backup. Yep, Johnny Briggs. Certainly, that is the indication that Martin Neal was saying a couple of days ago in an interview, was that they're looking for quality rather than quantity. I think there's no harm in taking a player that's in his early 20s who will get better and better and better. So I don't think I think always project players and development players, that seem to be something actually that Brendan Rodgers invented in terms of a phrase that he used a lot, or that he fed to various different journalists to use. If one talks about project players like Matt O'Reilly was signed as a relatively inexperienced midfielder coming from an English First Division side. Celtic turned him into a world-class player. So I do think sometimes the project player, development player is a bit of an overcoined phrase. I think players that Celtic, there's no harm in Celtic signing a player of 21, 22 who can turn into a Virgil van Dijk, a Moussa Dembele, an Odsonne Edouard, a Christopher Ayer, etc., etc., etc. Celtic's actually done a very good job recently of signing good, promising young European players and keeping them at the club for 2, 3, 4 years, getting a lot of success, a lot of goals, good performances out of them, and then signing them on for big profits in the future. Worked really well with Van Dijk, worked well with Odsonne Edouard, Dembele, etc., etc. So got no problem with buying players young who've got lots of ability and lots of potential, and then getting them better and better and better. But I do think they have to have the basic level of ability to come straight into Celtic's first team squad. Don't think that having the player simply being in the Celtic academy or B team, etc., is worth a big outlay. Classman up to Paderborn, 300,000 more, don't want to pay it, move on to get target number 2. I think the problem with Paderborn is the initial asking price was thought to be £4 million for him. It now appears that Paderborn want £5 million for him. It's a wee bit similar for me to what happened between Celtic and Brøndby a couple of seasons ago, when Celtic were trying to sign Matthias Kiesgaarden. Brøndby kept on coming back with a higher price. Celtic went in with the supposed asking price. Brøndby wanted another million on top of that. They then wanted another 2 million on top of that. Celtic then went back in the winter window. Brøndby suddenly wanted about £5 million than what they'd been asking for the previous summer. In the end, Kiesgaarden was sold for a lower price than what Brøndby had originally been asking for, that Celtic were willing to pay the very first time around. So it does appear that Brøndby are being very tough negotiators, despite the fact that Baur is desperate to leave the club. I think probably Baur and his agent will force Paderborn one way or another into accepting the Celtic bid. Maybe it's going to be a combination of clauses and add-ons and so on to bring up to the £5 million level. I think even if we did pay £5 million for him, that would be, I think, a very, very decent sign, or a very good signing. Player with lots of ability, good enough to be a Celtic first team player right from the start, and with the potential in 2, 3, 4 years' time to be a very, very good player for Celtic. And then probably in his mid-20s moving on to a bigger, better, stronger league. Stringology, McHugh, Bromby are, yep, Bromby were taking the Michael. You're quite right. That's a good point, actually, Michael Brett. All new signings will know they will have a new boss next season. I think that's it's a possibility. That is always, for me, a potential difficulty in terms of signing for a new club, is the uncertainty over who's going to be the manager next season or the season after, etc. I think a lot of players do like the thought of they sign for Celtic and they'll have the same head coach manager for this season, next season, the season after. It's not something actually Celtic have been able to do for the last dozen years or so, running Dahlia into Brendan Rodgers, into Lennon, into Postecoglou, Rodgers, and now into O'Neill. With O'Neill being 74 years old, it's unlikely he's going to be at Celtic for much more than a couple of seasons, this season and next. I don't see him really being Celtic long-term manager. Obviously, there are quite a number of managers who've managed well into their 70s. Bobby Robson, the guy Houghton down in England, a couple of the Italian managers have managed well into their mid-70s. I think O'Neill physically and mentally is still incredibly sharp, incredibly able. I think he's got some very, very good coaches around him who'll do a lot of the physical, or all the physical work for him. John Garland, do you think, still asking me, do you think Celtic will spend the money from Hatate to bring in Baur? I think Baur is coming into Celtic one way or another. I don't think Celtic are planning to need to sell Hatate or Engels to buy Baur, in that all that's been set up before either Engels or Hatate has actually left the club. From reading all the various different stories, it doesn't appear that anybody has actually put in a proper bid for Engels in the summer. Lots of bids from Notts Forest in the January window. There's about 20 different clubs reportedly who are considering bidding for Engels. Whether Celtic have said, when we sign Baur, then we'll start talking about Engels, that's one possibility. From reading between the lines, it does look like the O'Neill is happy for Hatate to leave the club. Hatate kind of fell out of favour at the end of the last season. He hardly played the last few games of the season. We've got Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain as a sort of an experienced backup midfielder. I think Oxlade-Chamberlain will be a better player for Celtic this season than he was in the half a season he played between January and May. He's now fully fit. He's had a full pre-season. I think he could be a very, very decent player for Celtic coming off the bench. Very decent occasional starter for Celtic to try and give whoever the first team, first choice players are a bit of a rest, be it for the last 20 minutes, half an hour of a game. I think if he gets to his full match fitness, the kind of form he was showing when he was playing across with Besiktas prior to his injury over there, I think we actually have got a decent experienced player there. So, Clashman Numpty putting forward some theories. Bernardo, Macau and Balakusha get rid of Jota if it's long term. Also offer him a payoff to get all the Deadwood off the books. The best clubs are the most ruthless. We are striving to improve. I think, although I've said this a few times before, I think McCowan is a decent midfielder, no more than that. He does give us the benefit of being Scottish trained. He does have the ability, the extra factor that he is mad keen Celtic fan. I would think that Celtic, if we do get a couple of midfielders in, I think players like Bernardo and Balikwisha will definitely be moving on. I think if anybody put in a bid for Balikwisha, as long as it was something decent like $1 million or $2 million, I think Celtic would bite off the hand straight away and sell him. Paulo Bernardo, in his loan season, I thought was a good player. He doesn't seem to have really kicked on with his career. Jota, I think we have to see how good Jota is when he comes back into full training around about October time. The story is round about November, December, he should be fit for first team action. And then I think we then give him a month or two to see how he does, building up his match fitness again. I thought prior to his injury, he was just starting to come back into just some good form. However, even when he was a bit ring rusty and lacking match sharpness, straight after his transfer from Rennes, having hardly played for about 18 months, I thought he actually showed some of the old Jota signs, scored some nice goals for Celtic, but obviously it was a long way away from where he should have been or could have been or used to be. However, I do think we need to give Jota the half a season left of this season when he comes back in November, December time, and then reassess that next summer. I think he does deserve the chance to prove himself again. Nice theory, Michael Brett. All out attack from the start, get ahead before half time. We've got the strikers now. Yes, I think it's something that Celtic obviously had in the days of Kyogo and Giakoumakis up front, backed up by Maeda, backed up by Abada, Jota, etc., etc. We did have players who could score goals. Matt O'Reilly came through as being a good goal-scoring midfield. I think we have got players. If we got on the front foot, push a team further and further back, we have got the chance that the players to score early goals. If Celtic score early goals against teams who are defending against them, it does then open the game up, and then Celtic have got the pace and the quality of strikers to exploit that as well. So it's a really good theory, and I think if Celtic could get back near to the way that we played under Ange Postecoglou, which is kind of what O'Neill says he wants to do, I think we could be Paul Boy 67 not so keen on McCowan. I think he, in terms of Scottish Premier League, he's a decent enough player. He did score for us across against Stuttgart. He scored that goal early in the game against Stuttgart to give us a 1-0 win in the end. I think he is a decent player. He's a backup player at Celtic. He ticks several boxes in terms of his Scottishness and his homegrownness. But for me, if Celtic have to play him as a regular starter, we're very, very deficient. A player on the bench, a player in the squad, a player for occasional starts and occasional backups. That's where I think McCowan is. If we do have to have him as a starter or as a person who we're relying on to come off the bench to change the game, I think we're in trouble. Clashman Umpty, two up front, Hogh and Duran. Yes, I think Baur would complement both of our two strikers. I think also a good couple of dynamic wingers, be it Hassan, Cancellieri, a couple of other options with Chinecki and Yang as the first and second backups. I think all that would be good. If we did play two up front, that would then probably mean that players like Johnston, Donovan, and Tierney would all have to be a bit more attacking from the fullback position. However, given the fact that Tierney was our number one for assists last season, his crossing, his passing into the box is good. Tierney chipped in with six goals last season, so if we can keep Kieran Tierney fit for next season like we did last season, I think we've got a very strong left back. If we can keep Alistair Johnson at the club like I expect us to be able to do, Gary Simpson saying, any truth in O'Reilly, or is it all false journalists at his best? I think my personal feeling is that the journalists these days love inventing stories regarding Celtic, taking rumours and gossip and turning it into certain stories. I think the standard of Scottish football journalism and football journalism in general has massively gone downhill. I think some journalists who used to be reliable sources of insider knowledge at Celtic, I don't think now that Brendan Rodgers has moved on that they are nearly as reliable or have inside knowledge like they used to. I think O'Neill had quite a good Rodgers had quite a good relationship with 2 or 3 Scottish football journalists, and I think he also often shared stories with journalists behind the scenes. So I don't actually think that people who claim to have insider knowledge, like the guy McGowan or the guy Gannon, I don't think they actually really have any inside knowledge as such at Celtic. Pat McLaughlin, I agree 100% with that. Too many hurting guns in journalism, trying to spin it their way, mischief making. It's except it's all there. I completely agree. I think more and more journalists, pundits, podcasters, social media people love creating a story based on virtually nothing, taking 2 and 2 and turning it into 5. The more stories I read, the more there are certain footballing sites nowadays that I pretty much ignore. The great majority of anything that's on the Scottish Daily Record page or the Scottish Sun Sports page, I pretty much ignore as well, because so much of it seems to be just either, as Pat McLaughlin is suggesting, mischief making, deliberately trying to give Celtic a kicking, stir up controversy, stir up bad feeling within the club, within the team, within the support, etc. So I do think the stories regarding Matt O'Reilly are unlikely. Admittedly, he's not had the happiest time since he moved to Brighton. Injury problems, struggling to get into the Brighton first team, sent out on loan. That didn't go so brilliantly either. So he still obviously is, I think, a good enough player to come back to Celtic, a young enough player to come back to Celtic. I don't personally see him having the club loyalty that maybe definitely a Tierney had or Jota had. I don't think he's quite got that same club loyalty that would make him come back to the club at this point, but maybe. Michael Ross claiming to be 6'7". Well, Michael Ross, if you're 6'7", maybe we should be getting you into Celtic central defence, because Cameron Carter-Vickers at 6'1" is relatively short for a centre back. Trusty and Scales are around about 6'3". Dane Murray's 6'4". I do think actually if Celtic did have a big, strong, tall centre back who could dominate things, I think that actually would be very useful. Or if we had a really dominant centre back like Bobo Baldi, very, very physical player, obviously, but a really surprisingly good defender. Not the best player on the ball, but not everybody in a team has to be a good ball player. if we had that sort of defensive strength and defensive mentality, either in midfield, in our defensive midfielder position, or as one of the centre backs, I think actually Celtic would be an even better team, I think. However, having said all that, I do think the addition of the specialist set piece coach is going to be a big positive for Celtic this season. It was one of Celtic's deficiencies last season was defending long throws, corners, free kicks into the box. It cost us goals against, particularly against Hearts, also against St Mirren in the League Cup final. 2 of the 3 goals were the result of high balls into the box that we just didn't defend. It cost us in the game against Dundee United under Wilfred Nancy. Cost us multiple times last season, and don't think Celtic quite were as dominant or able to score from direct free kicks and corners as much as they should have done. Some decent delivery from Tierney and Engels and Nygren. We didn't really have the really dominant player in the box. The head goals, Trusty and Scales don't really score enough, given their height and ability in the air. I think Kasper Hogh might well be a different matter to that, though. Totally agree, Clashman Numpty. We need a goalie to replace, challenge, delete as appropriate Sinisalo. I think Sinisalo, it deserves the chance to be the Celtic number 1 to start the season. However, as I said a couple of times over the last couple of hours, hour and a half rather, we do need someone way better than Duran to be the backup goalkeeper. Backup goalkeeper is obviously 1 injury, 1 bad challenge, 1 red card away from being the actual goalkeeper for a game or 2, and we need to have somebody better than that to be our backup. We were quite lucky in the Joe Hart days that we didn't really have to use our backup goalkeepers hardly at all. I think last season proved how important it is to have a real quality backup goalkeeper. We would have been in a really pretty perilous position last season had we not had Sinisalo available to come in and replace Kasper Schmeichel when eventually his injuries got the better of him. Michael Ross suggesting bringing back Marco Tilio. Tilio, who had a brilliant reputation in Australian football, he actually, when he was loaned back to Australian League the second time, he actually had a very good half season. He was the key factor actually in his loan club winning the Australian Championship that season. He got sold off to team in Austria. I don't think his career has actually gone very well for him in Austria. He was a player with lots and lots of talent, lots and lots of speed. Just at Celtic, he never really seemed to. He was injured when he came to Celtic. He had a bit more injury problems. He never really seemed to get into Brendan Rodgers' good books. He went off to play in Australia, got injured, came back, never got back into Celtic's team, got sent back on loan, had a really good loan season in Australian football. Brendan Rodgers didn't fancy him, and then he got sold off to Austrian football. So I don't think his career's gone terribly well in Austrian football, and he certainly hasn't managed to get himself back into the Australian national squad, which is where he was before he came to Celtic. Yep, Gary Simpson, we definitely need a number 6 defensive midfielder with dig, strength, and can see a pass. 2 decent wingers either side. Get rid of Chinekli. I would look at maybe not necessarily getting rid of Bernardo as such, but maybe sending him off on loan for a season so he gets regular first team football. Maybe if he's playing week in, week out at good quality of football, maybe that brings him back on again. When he was on loan at Celtic, I thought he was a decent player who really hasn't really shown that since he came to us as a permanent player. 4 million a couple of summers ago. Well, I mean, see, Moy retired too soon. I think Aaron Moy was a big surprise to me when Ange Postecoglou brought him in. Moy had been playing in Chinese football for a couple of years. He'd been out of football for a couple of months due to COVID reasons and moving back from China back to living with his family in Paisley. Moy came in, had a brilliant season for Celtic, and then decided to retire at about the age of 30, a bit similar actually to Rogic, who retired too young as well. And my understanding is that Rogic and Moy both have moved back to living in Australia and are enjoying the sunshine and enjoying the lifestyle in Australia. Don't think either of them have really got back into football. But if, for the sake of example, if we could get a similar season from Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain to the one that we got out of Moy for that one season at Celtic, I think Celtic would be be stronger in the midfield region totally. Clashman update: Donovan will do us a turn. I really see improvement in the limited games played pre-season. I think Donovan this season could be one of a few of the younger players to really kick on and establish himself as a real first-team Celtic squad player. I think he and Callum Osmond are two players that I'm looking to really kick on this season. I'm hoping that Yang will continue the improvement he showed last season compared to his first couple of seasons. I'm hoping that now that Tuniecki's had a break from football, a few weeks to recover after the World Cup, and a few weeks to build up his pre-season. Hopefully he shows the good form that he showed in patches last season rather than the bad form he showed in patches last season. But I completely agree with Lashman Umpty there. I think Donovan is one of two or three young players at Celtic who could really kick on and be important to Celtic this season coming. Kieran Allen, we have the best squad, the best manager, the best competition to grow, so there's no excuse this year. Brenda had too many. I think I would agree with many of those factors. I think Celtic have a better squad than any team in Scotland. We've got the best manager of all the managers in Scotland. I think we've got the two best signings so far this summer are the two Celtic players, Duran and Hogh. And I think both those players are way better than any player that Rangers, Hearts, Aberdeen, Dundee United, etc. have signed. I think Hearts have lost several of their best players. Motherwell have lost several of their best players. Motherwell look like they've changed their style and formation, which is not too unexpected with the new manager. I'm not convinced that that the way that McInnes sets up his teams or manages teams will work very well with the squad of players he has at Rangers. I'm not sure that appointing Lawrence Shankland as the captain of Rangers is a very good move for the squad mentality. With him only having come in this summer, there's a whole lot of players who have been at Rangers for several years who I think deserved the chance to be the captain ahead of Shankland. I think it's going to be a divisive move by McInnes. Not that it upsets me if McInnes makes bad decisions at Rangers. Obviously, that's very much in Celtic's favour. Yes, Dexter R9B. I was very sceptical when Aaron Moy was signed by Ange Postecoglou. As you say, all us fans thought Ange was losing his mind, but what a signing Moy was. Never doubted Ange again after that one. Certainly the great majority of Ange Postecoglou's transfer signings worked out well. A few of them didn't work out so well. Ideguchi, partly due to injury, was one of the signings that he made that didn't really work out terribly well. Kobayashi was a bit of a disappointment. He never seemed to settle down in Scotland. But the great majority of Ange Postecoglou's transfer decisions and promoting players from within the squad, changing players' roles. The great majority of things worked well with Ange Postecoglou. However, I do think in Martin O'Neill we've got a manager who is as good, if not better, than Ange Postecoglou, and of course, Martin O'Neill's win percentage record at Celtic is better than any other Celtic manager in the history of the club, better even than Jock Stein's win-loss record as a Celtic manager, and even with a rather dodgy squad last season, Martin O'Neill still found a way to win, or found a way to get the team to win an awful lot of games last season, despite the fact that we didn't play very well for about 2/3 to 3/4 of last season. Didn't really come into our own until the end of the season. Stringology McHugh, who is pronounced wow, right? So you certainly, some people are suggesting that it's like the ex-Newcastle manager Eddie Howe is how you pronounce his second name. Some people are suggesting that it's more like a Hugh. People are saying it's more like Hogh, as in Chris Hogh, the cyclist. Anyway, I think it's maybe simpler just to call him Kasper, and put Kasper on his back rather than his surname on his back. Joseph Agnew, when are the authorities going to fix football? I think to be fair, I think with the way that the VAR interpreted red cards and yellow cards last season, it did, to use a phrase, stamp out a bit of the rough tough of football. I think referees still at times were too forgiving of over the top tackles and overly aggressive tackles. Tackling is sort of a bit kind of gone out of the game. I do think that in general terms last season, with referees and with VAR, that's quite a lot of the rougher side of football was kind of filtered out with yellow cards and fouls and stuff. But I do take your point. I do think your point that Hearts certainly last season used a lot of physicality. Rangers used a lot of physicality in many of the games that they played, and they did kind of get away with it a bit too much. Having said that, I would actually quite like there to be a Celtic player in midfield able to mix it with people as well. Sort of midfield enforcer, the style of Wanyama or Scott Brown or Lennon or Lambert, etc. So I would quite like Celtic to have somebody with that ability in the midfield. So, who's the snitch saying this? They were saying that the Huns brought 8 players, another 3, and they have a team. I think they have bought some players. They've got 2 players in on free transfers, Devlin and Shankland. They've brought in some new goalkeeper. I'm not convinced that their new goalkeeper is a better goalkeeper than Butland. I think Butland was one of their better players for the last 2 or 3 years. They've brought in Ross McCrory, the number 6 or 7 Scotland right back, to replace Tavernier. Not that I like Tavernier as a person or as a player, but he was highly effective for Rangers. 100+ goals for Rangers, a lot of assists for Rangers. Scored a heck of a lot of free kicks and penalties, and good delivery from corners and free kicks into the box. I think Rangers actually are going to miss him a lot this season, and I'm not convinced that anybody Rangers have in their squad or they've brought into their squad is going to replace several of the players they've lost. I don't think they've got anybody to replace the dynamic abilities that Mikey Moore brought to them last season. We'll see, though. I don't, however, see them being stronger than Celtic over the course of the season. And I think a bad start for Rangers and very, very quickly the Rangers fan media and the Rangers fans will get on the back of the players like they did last season with Russell Martin. Paul Boy, hope the board aren't going. We've got a couple of Champions League level forwards. That's their lot, I think. As I said, all the indications are that Celtic are still very actively attempting to bring in Mika Baur, Hassiem Hassan. They're very actively looking to get a goalkeeper in and an additional left back. And it does feel a wee bit like they've got a first option and a second option, and then they've got backup options if several of the other ones fall through. I think personally, and again, this is just a personal opinion, not based on any knowledge or any expertise or anything inside, any kind of insider knowledge. I think that the Bauer deal and the Hassan deal will be going through in the next week or so. And a wee bit similar to the fact that the Kasper Hogh deal coming from Bodo Glimt kind of appeared all of a sudden within 2 or 3 days. It had progressed to him flying in for his medical, and then obviously at the start of this week him signing for Celtic. One would guess that he'll be on the bench for the game against Dundee on Monday, although it's perfectly possible for him to be a starter on Monday. Given the fact that he's already played about a dozen games for Bodo Glimt this season in the Norwegian League. Yep, Pat McLaughlin. They had a big outlay last summer, big outlay in the winter. They spent a lot of the money that was earmarked for the summer of 2026. They spent in the winter window of 2026. I'm not quite sure how Rangers are going to put all those midfielders that they've got in the side, in the squad, into a first team squad. I think they will be one way or another getting rid of 2 or 3 players, selling them on or loaning them out or whatever. I think they've got too many midfielders, too many players covering the same position. I think they've got a lack of creativity in midfield, a lot of enforcers in midfield, but a lot of players who like playing deep midfield and not really getting forward. Anyway, enough talking about Rangers, more talking about Celtic. Pinball 7992. We have a pretty full squad. We need to sell before we buy. I think Celtic could easily sign 2 or 3 more players: goalkeeper, left back, another midfielder, another wide player, quite happily, and fit that into the squad that we've got. We've already moved on Stephen Welsh, Mike Nawrocki, Luis Palma, Hayata Inamura, Shin Yamada. So we've already actually got rid of 5 or 6 players from last year's squad. Now, quite a few of those players actually were out on loan rather than part of Celtic's squad, but they still were employed by Celtic. So I do think Celtic actually have already moved on quite a number of, to use Clashman Numpty's phrase, the deadwood. I think we certainly could happily move on a couple more players like Paolo Bernardo, maybe definitely Mikael Ong-Barlaquisha. I might be at this point keen to keep hold of Johnny Kenny as a backup, although I think Callum Osman is the number 3 centre forward for Celtic behind the other 2. But I might be inclined to keep Johnny Kenny maybe at least for another 6 months, just as an additional player to use off the bench when things get a bit congested in terms of fixtures, when the pitches get a bit heavy and wet and snowy and muddy and stuff. So Paul Maguire raising the Champions League qualifiers that are going to be in a couple of weeks, 3 weeks time. Link just came through saying Celtic's possible opponents, AEK Athens. AEK Athens are now seeded. So basically, because Lech Poznan were knocked out by the Danish club Aarhus, it meant that AEK Athens are now a seeded team. So we won't play against AEK Athens. The teams that we can play. So the teams that Celtic can play. So the teams that Celtic can play in next year in the Champions League qualifiers on the 18th, 19th of August and the 25th and 26th. So we either will play against LASK of Austria, who are the Austrian champions, or Viking of Norway, who are the Norwegian champions. They beat Bodo Glimt last season to the Norwegian League. We'll play against the winner of AGF Aarhus of Denmark or Saba of Azerbaijan. They've got a game this next week and the week after, prior to the game in mid-August. We might play Kira Almaty if they can beat Levski Sofia in the next two-legged round, or we could play Celtic of Slovenia or Ararat Armenia of Armenia. So those are the 8 teams we could play in the final qualifying round. So LASK and Viking are already through. Then the winner of Aarhus against Saba, the winner of Kira Almaty against Levski Sofia, or the winner against Celtic against Ararat Armenia. Draw is this Monday on the 3rd of August, around about 12 noon, 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Games are played on the 18th and 19th of August, and then the return games 25th and 26th of August. Celtic could be at home in the first leg or home in the second leg. We don't get seeded home draw for second legs, unfortunately. And as someone was asking last week, the 25-man squad deadline is August the 13th at 22:59. However, after that, you can make 2 changes to that squad as long as that change is made prior to 22:59, the day before the first leg. So if Celtic were to sign a couple of players between the 13th of August and the 18th of August, we can change and add in a couple of players to the squad. So AEK Athens were moved from an unseeded team to a seeded team because Lech Poznan got knocked out by the Danish side. So it does actually mean that possibly the strongest team that Celtic could have been drawn against has been moved from unseeded to seeded. As far as I'm aware, that's the official UEFA line of what the teams are going to be in the Champions League draw on the 3rd of August. Johnny Briggs suggesting Almaty to get payback. Kena Almaty have this amazing ability to win one way or another coming through the qualifying rounds. They lost 1-0 away from home in Cyprus to Ammonia Nicosia. They won the game in Kazakhstan 1-0. They then won the game on penalties 6-5. They did the same thing last year. They came through a draw against Slovan Bratislava to win that game on penalties. Then obviously they drew with Celtic 0-0 and 0-0, and then won on penalties. So they seem to have an incredible ability to win through qualifiers. Clash Winumpty not very keen on keeping Johnny Kenny. Fair enough. I'm 50-50 on keeping Johnny Kenny. Might be quite handy if one of the white players that we do sign, white players, has the ability to double up as a second striker. That's the case with Cancellieri. Hassan not really so skilled at stepping forward to being a striker. However, he does play can play in midfield centrally, can play attacking midfield as well as wide positions. I think of all those teams, and I think certainly you're quite right that Kenny is 2 or 3 steps down from Osmond, and 4 or 5 steps down from Duran and Kasper. No, Ararat is in Armenia, and again, one of the snags of these countries like Armenia, Kazakhstan, Azerbaijan, Slovenia is longer travel distance to get there and back. Also, those teams are all well into their seasons. Obviously, Celtic on the 18th and 19th of August will just be a couple of games into their new season. A lot of these other teams are halfway through their season. I think that's part of the benefit that the Norwegian sides, the Danish sides have as well, because they don't play in wintertime football. It does mean that in the summer and the autumn, they're actually fully match fit and up to speed. Well, Celtic are still just trying to get up to full speed. However, I do think that O'Neill will get things better organised this year than Rodgers did last season. I think O'Neill will scout things far better, will prepare Celtic far better, and will do his preparation of how any opposition team's going to play. Plunge 274. Ararat beat Shamrock Rovers fairly comfortably. However, of all the teams that Celtic can get, LASK of Austria, Viking of Norway, the winner of Aarhus against Saba, the winner of Kira Almaty against Sofia, the winner of Kaliji against Ararat or Armenia. I think in all those games, Celtic would be the favourites, assuming that we play to near our potential, and assuming that our management, coaches, and so on do their homework prior to the game, which I don't think Rodgers did last season. So pinball 7992. So if Celtic get through that one round, they're into the Champions League extended league group phase. So basically, Celtic have to win a 2-legged tie, a home and away 2-legged tie. If they win that on aggregate, they're into the Champions League proper. No more qualifiers after that. Next season will be a different matter, assuming that Celtic win the title this year, as I fully expect, and that next season we'll have to go through 2 or probably 3 rounds of qualifying to get into the Champions League. Unfortunately, because Scotland's coefficient has gone down so much over the last couple of seasons, rather than having straight qualification like we did for a couple of seasons, and then these last 2 seasons, last season and this season, it's been 1 qualifying round. Next season, it's going to be 2 for definite, probably 3 qualifying rounds to get to the same stage. So I think that's another reason why it's important that Celtic do their absolute best to get into the Champions League this season. For one reason, 30 to 40 million pounds will help with player recruitment, player salaries, and fund more additions in the winter window. Maybe extend the contracts for some of the Celtic players like Johnston and Nygren, etc. But also help reboost the coefficient to get it back up to the levels it was a few seasons ago. Yep, Paul Maguire, we should be able to beat any of those teams, but we said that last year. Yep, as I said, don't know whether other people agree with me. I don't think Celtic prepared physically, mentally for those games against Kira Almaty. I think Brendan Rodgers and many of the squad had this sort of complacency that we just have to turn up and we'll beat Kira Almaty. They were a very organised team, a very dogged team, a very well together team, played very well as a bunch of players. They played for each other and played with a lot of spirit and organisation, and they maximised lower levels of talent to nullify the way that Celtic played. As I said, last season they came through 3 or 4 rounds of qualifying to beat Celtic. They won a couple of those games on penalties like they did against Celtic. They've done the same again this season. They beat Omonia of Nicosia, a team well above them in the rankings. 1-1 after 2 legs, 1-1 after extra time, and then beat them 6-5 on penalties. So I do think, however, that Celtic will go into those 2 games much better organised. Particularly if we get another few signings over the door between now and that first game. Clumsy Colin, yep. Taylor would be a wise purchase, perfect squad player. I think there are many benefits to Greg Taylor. He knows the club, he knows the country. He is a Scottish trained player, which helps with UEFA. By the same token, as a defensive player, he's not that strong. For set pieces, he's definitely a weakness at 5'7". If Celtic's on the attack, I think he's a good player for Celtic. If Celtic's on the defence, I think he is a bit of a liability. But if we see Greg Taylor as being a bit like the equivalent of Anthony Ralston on the other side or Luke McCowan in midfield, I think there might be a place for Greg Taylor within the squad. But I don't see him having any ability to challenge Kieran Tierney for the number 1 spot. Thank you, Stringology McHugh 4245. Yes, if you haven't subscribed already, please do subscribe. It does help with spreading the channel. It does. Aiming to get to 2,000 subscribers by the end of the year, so we're a couple of hundred away from that. It would be the last month for the channel has been absolutely amazing. We've gained nearly 200 subscribers over the last month. The live streams have gone from power to power. Incredible still that 78 people are watching it 2 hours into the live stream. A wee bit similar, complete opposite to what Mark O'Neill was talking about, who O'Neill going for quality rather than quantity. On the David 67 live stream, you get quantity more than quality. No other live stream goes on and on for 2 hours or 3 hours or 4 hours. So if most live streams after half an hour or an hour maximum are saying goodbye, with the David 67 channel, you can keep on talking to me for 3 hours at least, sometimes 4 hours. So on the channel, it's quantity over quality sometimes, but the quality of the comments in the comment section are amazing. Lots and lots of good ideas, lots and lots of good theories, lots and lots of pleasant, respectful debate. Dexter, what was the story? No games on TV tonight. I watch Hearts on Hearts TV. Looking forward to the games tonight. I had to settle looking at teams on my coupon who had games on. I thought the Hearts game had been on television, but maybe not. Maybe it's to do with contracts and visibility and stuff. Tonight it was the Motherwell game and the Hibs game. Both of those looked like they were. Motherwell definitely through. Hibs were 4-0 up with about half an hour to go, so I'm sure they've qualified now, which is good for Scottish football. But I wasn't aware that none of the Scottish games were on television. I would have thought that one of the Scottish-based channels could have had the Hibs game on. Thank you, thank you, Clashman Numpty. I'd say the channel in general is as much about you as it is about me, and the live streams are much more about you than they are about me. I am the one that does a lot of the talking. As I said on last week's live stream, I'm exploring the options of having guest speakers on the channel on the live streams from time to time. That does take, there's additional software and various other things that we need to get in place, which probably is something I can make plans for after Christmas and into the new year, if Santa Claus is kind to me. And with the fact that the channel nearly got 2,000 subscribers and got a popular live stream now, all those things are auguring well for a bit of an expansion in 2027. Yes, Clumsy Colin. We start at 9 o'clock on a Thursday, and we typically go through to midnight. Sometimes we go through to 1 o'clock. And when it does come to transfer deadline day at the end of August, I usually do a transfer deadline day video live stream that starts about 9, goes through to about 1 o'clock in the morning. We've done that the last couple of times. Those have been quite Yep. Clashman Numpty, I don't think we need to make any more donations to Celtic. I think us fans already make enough donations to Celtic in terms of season tickets, game tickets, merchandising, food, drink, all the other stuff that we buy from Celtic, the Celtic Player TV channel. I think Celtic, as fans, we already donate enough of our hard-earned cash to Celtic. I do think, however, not everybody agrees with me, but I do think Celtic are actively trying to bring in 2, 3, 4, 5 new players over the next few weeks. And I do think, as I've said before on previous live streams, that if we win those Champions League qualifiers as is expected, that then gives us an extra week or so to bring in another player or two who will be keener to come to Celtic with the guarantee of Champions League football. I think that was a bit of a hold up with things last season. However, I'm very, very hopeful. 2 or 3 more players in the next fortnight or so prior to the first leg of the qualifier, and then another player or 2 over the course of the last fortnight or so of the transfer window after that. Sligo Boy, as I said, I think as fans already are making enough donations to the Celtic piggy bank. So I think it's now putting a degree of trust into Maloney and O'Neill and the players, hoping that the various negotiations for Baur and Hassan and so on all come to pass in the next few weeks. And then I'm very, very sure whoever is signed for Celtic at the end of the transfer window, at the end of August, O'Neill and Maloney will turn them into a good squad, a good team, and that will power its way to a double or treble in Scotland and power its way into the knockout stages in European football. Good night to you, Michael Brett. Nice to have had you on. So just thought it might be a wee bit interesting to have a bit of a debate as to who do we think's going to be Celtic's starting 11 for the game against Dundee on Monday the 3rd of August, so 4 or 5 days away. I don't think Celtic will have anybody into the squad able to play the game on Monday. So in essence, it's all the players currently at Celtic. That would include at the moment Engels and Hatate and so on. It might be a wee bit interesting to see whether Engels and Hatate are in the team or in the squad for the game on Monday. Might give us a clue as to where things are in terms of them leaving the club. However, if I was going to predict a team for Monday, I'm going to go for Sinisalo and then Johnston at right back, Carter Vickers and Trusty. Trusty because Scales is suspended. Tierney at left back, McGregor and Engels and Nygren in midfield. I think out wide on the right is liable to be Yang, on the left Chinecki, and through the middle starting with Duran, with Kasper on the bench, and then with half an hour to go bringing on Hogh, Kasper, and then putting Duran out to the right wing or the left wing, etc. Don't think there's going to be too many surprises. One surprise might be whether we go with two up front to start with. That's a definite possibility. Maybe using our fullbacks instead of wide players, having a bit more dig and midfield presence, and not using Yang or Chinecki as out-and-out wingers. We could use Yang more as a right-sided midfielder. He's got the tackling ability. He's got the ball-winning ability. He's got the ability to close down and block and so on in midfield, much more so than Chinecki on the other side. But I suspect that O'Neill will start with a similar 4-3-3 to the one that Celtic's used for the last several seasons, and then maybe with the option of going two up front at the end if needs be. And in terms of a predicted score, I'm going to go for a Celtic 3-0 win against Dundee on Monday, with a goal-scoring debut for Duran and for Kasper, and maybe a goal for someone like Nygren or Tierney as well. So, in the words of Stringology McHugh, 4-2-4-5, 4 speaks to Flag Day. That sounds about right. So we'll have the Champions League qualifier draw a few hours before that. That's around about 12 noon or 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And obviously the Flag Day, releasing the flag, and then the game live on Sky Sports in the early evening. Not a great fan of Celtic starting their season on a Monday evening. It was unavoidable, apparently, because the Commonwealth Games is on in Glasgow at the same time, and Calvin Harris has got a couple of big concerts at Hampden Park that weekend as well. So reportedly, the Scottish Police Service and stuff weren't able to divvy up their various different police people and security people to look after the Commonwealth Games, which admittedly the Commonwealth Games cycling venue is right next to Celtic Park, but reportedly they didn't have enough police to go around with the Hampden concerts and the Commonwealth Games and the Celtic game at the weekend. So unfortunately we're starting on a Monday evening. I think that might make the crowd a bit lower than it would have been ordinarily. Obviously quite difficult for people from Ireland, from England, from north of Scotland to get down to Celtic Park for an evening kickoff on a Monday. It's a lot more. It's easier generally for a midweek game. It's obviously a lot easier for a Saturday or a Sunday game. So Paul McGuire going for Sinisalo, Johnston, Carter Vickers. Scales is suspended for the first game, so Scales misses the game against Dundee and misses the second game of the season. Tierney, McGregor, Engels, Nygren, Duran, Kasper and Yang. Yep, I think definite possibility of starting Duran and Kasper in the same side. I think Yang probably, of all of our current wide players, probably is the one who is a wee bit ahead of Ginecki and Forrest and so on. So, as I say, Scales is suspended for 2 games, so he can't play the first couple of league games. So I'm sure it's going to be Trusty. I would be surprised if Dane Murray starts rather than Trusty. Although Trusty only came into training on Monday, he obviously had a full World Cup, fully match fit, had a couple of weeks off for family reasons, bit of a break in America, then he's back to Celtic. I don't think he's going to need any kind of warm-up to come straight back into the Celtic playing team. Nor do I think that Johnston or Nygren needs any kind of warm-up games other than what they're going to do in training. Don't worry, Paul Maguire. When I was first thinking about the Celtic lineup for this first game of the season, I'd forgotten the fact that Scales was going to be suspended. I think probably had Scales not been suspended, he would have been the first choice left back to partner Cameron Carter-Vickers. I think personally that Trusty and Carter-Vickers probably actually will form a better partnership than Scales and Carter-Vickers. But I do think that Martin O'Neill likes Scales better than he likes Trusty. And Scales, very, very hard-working player. For me, gives away too many fouls, sometimes can be out-muscled by strong players, often gets outpaced by players as well. Trusty also can get out-muscled by players, but doesn't tend to get beaten by players with pace. He tends to have that ability to recover if a player does get past them. And Scales tends to foul people if a person gets past them. Good point, Wyoming CSC. We could still get Penrice. So the contrast between Penrice and Taylor, who obviously are both playing as left backs in Greek football at the moment, is that Penrice had a bit of a better season for his Greek team than Taylor. Taylor only played 18 games last season for PAOK. He's number 2 or number 3 left back currently in the PAOK squad for left back position. So he's more likely to want to leave the club than Penrice. Penrice played about 30 odd games for his team last year in Greek football, had a better season generally than Taylor had last season. However, Celtic could go back in for Penrice. Penrice has 2 years left in his contract in Greek football, so at this point, probably Penrice is going to stick it out in Greece for one more season and then look at coming back to Scotland after that. But Celtic have got the option to go back in for Penrice. Penrice would have the benefit of being a few inches taller than Taylor, better at set pieces, etc. Good defender generally, has the ability to come forward. And Penrice, obviously being Scottish trained and a Scottish national, would tick the boxes for UEFA quotas. So there would be quite a lot of benefit to go back in for Penrice. However, it did appear that the first sort of negotiations and inquiries between Celtic and the club and Celtic and Penrice's agent, the suggestion was that Penrice isn't looking to come back to Scotland this season, maybe next season. Yep, Michael Meehan. My understanding is that Penrice has been much more part of the squad. Taylor's been kind of out the squad. Whether Taylor chose to be out the squad or not He was absent for a couple of the P8OK European games. Yep, plunge. Neither does Duran. We signed him, yes. So Camilo Duran, however, unlike a few players who've come to Celtic in recent years, recognised that the language barrier was a difficulty for him. So the story is that Camilo Duran is very, very actively doing learning English lessons. As I said, there were one or two wee sort of stories behind the scenes that Marcello Sirachi never really bothered to learn English. He conversed just in Spanish through his interpreter. Also conversed via a couple of other people at Celtic who could speak Spanish. Paulo Bernardo apparently is quite fluent in Spanish. He's been helping Camilo Duran settle down quite a lot into Scottish football and into the club. However, Camilo Duran has very actively tried to learn English, which is also the case for Haiyun Yang. He's been very active learning English. I think also given the fact that Camilo Duran's moved from country to country, he's played obviously in Colombia where he was born. He played also in Brazilian football, played in Portuguese football, had a season in Azerbaijan with Karabakh, and now he's at Celtic. I think he's proven over several seasons that he's got the ability to adapt to a new country, adapt to a new language. And as I say, the indications are very, very positive that he's making a strong effort to learn English as quickly as he can, which some people were saying was a failing that Marcello Sirachi never properly addressed last season at Celtic. So it's like a boy saying language barrier. It's just a big fence covered by graffiti. I think there is, to an extent, there's a sort of universal footballing language. However, I do think in terms of following training and so on, it is important for players to be able to converse with each other and follow instructions. Clashman Umpty. Thank you very much, Classman Umpty. Thank you for all those compliments. Thank you for all your lovely comments on the live stream this evening, all your great ideas, all your clever in discussion points, and I'll pass on my good wishes to Mrs. Davis 7 and Little Miss Davis 67. Well, I mean, CSC, Dyson didn't speak a word of English, didn't matter. I think Dyson Maida's English was actually better than he put on. One of the other factors that was, I think, significant was the fact that Dyson Maida's wife and his eldest child actually settled down very well into Scottish life. Reportedly, that Mrs. Dyson Maida was quite outgoing, enjoying her life in Glasgow, and that her eldest child was settling into nursery or preschool or whatever. I think Dyson Maida's ability to understand English was a lot better than his ability to speak English. But I do take your point. Maida, Hatati, Kyogo, none of them really particularly took on speaking English on a regular basis. To give him credit, Haiyun Yang does do his best to speak in English when he does get interviewed, and we're quite lucky that quite a lot of our other players, like Nygren, Chunecki, Engels, etc., are all able to speak 2, 3, 4, 5 different languages very, very capably, including English. And that's obviously the case with Kasper. Coming from Denmark, his level of English is very, very good as well. Alison Timpany, sometimes I pretend I don't speak English. Yep, fair enough. I know where you're coming from. But I do think, in general terms, having all the squad able to understand orders and instructions and changes of formation and changes of tactics quickly and easily is useful. But I dare say there's probably some form of shorthand, some form of other ways that instructions get passed on to the players whose English isn't quite so good. Yep, Johnny Briggs dip into the Asian market. I think Celtic obviously quite a number of years ago, particularly when Ange Postecoglou was the manager, we got some very, very good players from Japanese football. Didn't really work out quite so well for us in more recent years with Hayato Inamura, although I think he actually was a much better player than he got credit for. I think Shin Yamada, had we used him better than the way that Rodgers used him initially, I think he could have actually turned into a pretty decent player. He had an okay end to his loan season in Germany. Hopefully his loan season in Belgian football allows him to settle down into European football. So I think we do have a player in Yamada who's got a lot of ability. He's got tons and tons of pace, which we never really used. He was reportedly the fastest ever player in Japanese football. So he beat the Daisen Maida's record for running quickly in the Japanese J League. So we never really allowed Yamada space and time on the ball to use his speed and ability. We kind of used him as a more of a Kyoko style of player, rather than letting him come from deeper using his pace or getting out wide to use his pace. Yes, Wemming season, whatever happened to Abelgard? He came into Celtic for about like half a season or so, and then he disappeared back where he came from. I think they bought him in actually from Russian football, which is now obviously banned because you can't buy people from Russian football or sell people to Russian football currently. Don't know where Abelgard's actually ended up. So, according to Wikipedia, Oliver Abelgard is now playing for Sampdoria. So, played for Celtic for 6 games, then he went to Verona, then to Como, then to Pisa, and he's now playing his second season at Sampdoria. So obviously Abelgard has left Scotland, left Celtic, gone to play for 3 different teams in Serie A. So pretty decent level of football. So So looks like maybe another player that just didn't settle at Celtic, or that he didn't quite fit in at Celtic. Celtic got loaned him out, or cancelled his loan. He then got loaned to Italian football, sold to Italian football, and he's now at Sampdoria. Yep, YMC was never given much of a chance. As I say, came to Celtic from Russian football, from Rubin Kazan. Obviously came at quite a stormy time in terms of Russian history, Ukrainian history. Came with a pretty good reputation, as I say. Never seemed to really get a chance at Celtic or settle at Celtic, and then went to Italian football, and say he's now at Sampdoria. So he's clearly moved on to a very decent level of football, having left Celtic. So one of quite a lot of players who have come to Celtic, never really properly got a chance. Well, Scott Dougal, I think if Sampdoria are currently in Serie B, which I think is actually the case, it's still, I would say, probably Serie B in terms of quality of football is pretty decent. Obviously, as I said before, he was at Verona and Como before that, so he left Celtic to play for two Serie A teams. I think Sampdoria were a much stronger team in the past. I think Serie B still, I think the great majority of the Serie B teams, if they got transferred into the Scottish Premiership, I think they would be up there challenging Hibs and Hearts and Rangers, etc., to be backing up Celtic or losing to Celtic overall in the season. So I think Serie B in Italy is still a very strong level of football. Obviously not as strong as their Serie A clubs, but I do think Sampdoria, the kind of team that could yo-yo up and down between Serie B, Serie A, a bit like Verona, a bit like several other clubs like that. Obviously, Como have gone on to bigger and better things. Champions League this time around as well. Anyway. So, what are people thinking about in terms of the game on Monday? Are we confident that Celtic will start the season well against Dundee? Dundee last season, a wee bit of a bulky side for Celtic. We obviously lost to Dundee at Dens Park 2-0 under Brendan Rodgers. Pretty awful game of football on a pretty awful pitch. Quite disorganised Celtic team went out that day. I think there was a lot of stuff going on in the background between Rodgers and the board, Rodgers and the players, Rodgers and the coaches. Don't think the players were playing for each other or playing for Rodgers. I think Celtic was a bit of a mess at that point. Obviously, we were losing against Dundee in the Cup right until about the 6th minute of added time when Junior Adamu got an equaliser. Then we beat them in extra time. And then we, at the start of our very good run of 100% wins that ended the season last season, we started that with a 2-1 win at Dens Park with a late Kelechi Iheanacho goal. We beat Dundee 1-0 at Celtic Park in Martin Neal's last game of his first caretaker spell last season. So team actually last season where we struggled to beat them. We did beat them 2-1, 1-0. We beat them 2-1 in the cup after extra time. We did, however, lose to them at Dens Park early in the season in a rather terrible game. Gary Simpson going for definitely confident for flag night, 4-1. Kasper getting 2, Duran getting 1, Nygren getting 1. Yep. I think also having Duran and having Kasper in the box will actually open up a lot more space for Nygren to come in late into the box as well. I think it actually could allow Nygren to be a bit more of an all-around player next season. Could also allow him to keep up with scoring the 20-plus goals he scored last season with a similar amount this season. And I do think with Kasper up front, Duran and Nygren, maybe goals contributions from a couple of the wide players, I think we could get back to the good old days of players like Kyogo scoring 30-plus, or a couple of seasons ago, Maida scoring 30-plus, Kuhn scoring 21, and Ida scoring 20. I think that's the kind of season that Celtic can look to this season coming. Kasper scoring 30-plus, Duran scoring 20, and maybe Nygren scoring 20, and plenty of goals from the wide players to back that up as well. Scott Dougal also going for a good win for Celtic, 4-0, 2 for Kasper. With 1 for Kasper, 2 for Duran, and 1 for Jamesy. I think James Forrest could be a good player for Celtic coming off the bench. Really hope that Forrest doesn't start very many games next season, but I do think his ability for 10-15 minutes at the end of the season to 10-15 minutes at the end of a game to find a bit of space, find a good ball into the box, etc. I think he's a very useful player for Celtic coming off the bench. However, if he's having to start games on a regular basis again, I think we're in trouble, and we do need, for me, a couple of wide players so that Forrest is the backup coming off the bench rather than having somebody who we're having to rely on at all. Plunge 274. Thank God we didn't sign Senior Adamu. Apparently he was worse. Junior Adamu, again, as probably isn't too unexpected for players coming in from other teams where they weren't getting very, very many games. So players like Joel Mvuka and Junior Adamu, Thomas Chavanchara weren't really getting very many games for their parent clubs. Adamu scored 1 very, very important goal for Celtic. Without that goal, Celtic would have been knocked out the cup by Dundee, wouldn't have gone on to win the double. So he did score 1 very important goal for Celtic. Thomas Chavanchara scored a couple of goals for Celtic, but he also scored that absolutely vital penalty again in the cup to win the penalty shootout at Ibrox. Really, I thought, incredible calmness and confidence to step up and take that penalty. Incredible pressure to take that penalty, and he put it away really, really nicely. However, very, very clearly, Mvuka, Adamu and Chavanchara didn't have the ability, the consistency, the quality to become Celtic players, and we passed on all those players. Quite what the truth was regarding Sirachi and Iheanacho. It does look like to me, reading between the lines, that Iheanacho wasn't that keen to stay at Celtic, and he was much more keen for his agent to look for better offers. Quite a lot of people have been pointing to the fact that Celtic had a 1-year option to extend Kelechi Iheanacho. In general terms, with any kind of contract that's got a 1-year option, it's a mutual thing where both the player and the club have to agree to it. And with the fact that very, very soon after, around about the time that Iheanacho's contract was about to run out, his agent had already tried to pitch Iheanacho getting a game for one of the Brazilian sides. He seemed to very quickly get the deal for the Turkish club organised. So I do think that probably Iheanacho wasn't actually as keen as people suggested to stay at Celtic. Quite what the truth is with with Marcello Sirachi, I don't know. Martin O'Neill and the Celtic board and the Celtic PR people have kind of kept quiet about it. Whether it was money, whether it was to do with Sirachi wanting a longer contract than Celtic wanted to give him, whether there were issues about him fitting into the squad. As I say, Sirachi has gone from club to club to club to club to club. He's not really settled anywhere. And as I said, despite the fact that I think Sirachi was a very, very decent player for Celtic, I would have been happy for Celtic to have signed him. However, I'm not so convinced that he was that keen to come to Celtic. Otherwise, he would have come to Celtic. They would have got a deal organised and dealt for him. Dexter saying Chavan Chara wouldn't have got a game for our supporters club. I think Chavan Chara again was being used not really in his best way of playing. O'Neill used him more as a target man centre forward, the way that he wanted to use Iheanacho, but Iheanacho wasn't fit. Chavan Chara, despite the fact that he was well over 6 foot tall, was actually a player with a lot of pace, who was better running at defences rather than being a target man. So I do think had we used Chavan Chara in his best setup, his best position, he probably would have been a better player for Celtic. In essence, he was kind of shoehorned into the role that Iheanacho was supposed to be playing, except Iheanacho wasn't fit to play it. Fair enough, Dexter. If your dog's telling you need to go for a walk, you need to go for a walk. It's been lovely having you as part of the live stream. I would agree with a lot with what you're saying there, Scott Dougal. Kelechi, no great loss. To be honest, his fitness let him down. Yes. It was very, very clear when he came back the second time from his second hamstring injury. He clearly just could not get himself match fit. He struggled to get himself match fit first time around. However, having had a couple of months out with his second hamstring injury, he never seemed to be able to come back and play for Celtic, giving any more than about 20 minutes for Celtic at the end of a match. Had things gone well for his fitness, he should have been a player starting those games for Celtic rather than being a player coming off the bench. Not that he didn't do very well coming off the bench for Celtic at the end of the season, scored like half a dozen goals in the last couple of months of the season, so clearly made a big contribution, but I think he would have been better all around had he got himself properly fit, which Michael Ross, I'm not aware that I said foghorn, leghorn. If I did, I've mispronounced whatever I said, or you've misheard what I said. Kenneth Todd saying, David, do you think we could go for the Honey Badger if we lose AG? He's on a big wage, but Martin... I think, as I said before, I think, yes, the answer to that question would be if Alistair Johnston did leave the club, which I don't think is going to happen. I think Johnston's going to be at Celtic for a couple more seasons at the very least. However, I do think Arojo would be first in line to be brought back in to replace Johnston if Johnston did leave. I think Arojo would be willing to take a bit of a pay cut to come to Celtic. He's reportedly on either 50,000 a week or 70,000 a week at Bournemouth. I think, however, he would be quite happy to take a bit of a pay cut to come to Celtic. So we dropped him to 35 or 40,000 pounds a week, which is still obviously £2 million a year, so it's still a massive contract. I think he would be happy to come back to Celtic. I think if he was coming back to Celtic to be the number one right back, that obviously would be a bigger attraction than coming back to Celtic to be the backup to Johnson. Although I actually would like both Johnson and Araujo to be in the squad. I think it would give us a lot more options in the right back position, the right midfield position. Would give us options for going 3 at the back, wing backs, 5-3-2s, 3-5-2s, all kinds of things. And I do think Araujo and Johnson could actually play forward into midfield, where they have done from time to time in the past. Good night to you, Alison Timpany. It's been wonderful having you on, and lots of good opinions and good thoughts again this evening. So thank you for sticking with us till nearly midnight. Yes, Scott Dougal, again, quite a lot of people are less certain that Johnson's going to stay at Celtic than I am. Again, listen, I've got absolutely no inside knowledge. I'm just guessing, analysing what he said when he came to the club, the fact that he's been a lifelong Celtic supporter. I think there aren't terribly many players playing for Celtic at the moment who have been lifelong Celtic supporters. Obviously, Forrest, McGregor, Ralston, Tierney are exceptions to that. McCown's another exception to that, but don't think the other 3/4 of the squad are particularly that Celtic mad. However, as ex-players like Joe Hart, Matt O'Reilly, several others have said, playing for Celtic is an absolute dream. The support's brilliant, the atmosphere is brilliant, the success of the club is absolutely brilliant. So I do think personally that Johnson's going to be at Celtic a couple more seasons. I think he's got more loyalty to the club than most overseas players do. Good night to you as well, Michael Ross. Lovely to have had you on. Lots of great comments and thoughts throughout the live stream. Yep, Sligo Boy. So Wyoming CSC. Before my time as a fan again, but Fergus saved us for sure. Yep. I had the misfortune to be, fortune or misfortune, depending on your point of view, to be a Celtic fan around about the late 80s into the 90s. Celtic in that time was absolutely terribly badly run in terms of finances and organisations. We got bigger and bigger debts. We didn't deliver in much success, if any at all, on the pitch for many, many of the seasons throughout the 80s into the 90s. And depending on which source you believe, we were within hours or a couple of days of going completely bankrupt and being liquidated out of existence, or liquidated and demoted to the bottom division, which is what obviously happened to Rangers in 2012. However, Fergus McCann bought the club over, paid off all the debts, invested lots of money, modernised the club, modernised the stadium, modernised the infrastructure, modernised the way that Celtic was managed off the pitch in terms of finances, etc., and then sold on for a decent, although not big, profit to Dermot Desmond, who has carried that on. But don't think overall he is nearly as popular as Fergus McCann was. Yep. Scott Dougal, Fergus deserves a statue, saved our club. Yep, I think there's I would say he is certainly one person who probably does deserve some form of memorial at Celtic Park, be it a statue, be it a stand, be it some kind of facility, restaurant, something. I think Celtic do need to honour Fergus McCann, because he did bail out the club in 1994 and turned the club around. Yep. Oops. Gordon Flowers. Yep. great for you to join us all the way from Australia. Fergus saved us and we can't forget. Yep, I do think a lot of the younger Celtic fans don't have any real memory of the rather dodgy days Celtic had for much of the 80s and much of the 90s. We had a few good seasons over that spell, but for many seasons we were lagging behind Rangers, sometimes lagging behind Dundee United, lagging behind Aberdeen. Good spell in the 80s where Dundee United and Aberdeen were very, very strong, which made Scottish football in general quite a bit stronger. But during that spell, Celtic didn't have a lot of success and got themselves deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper into debt until McCann bailed us out and turned us around into a proper, well-run club. Snyder Boy saying Celtic fans don't think Everton are good. I think Everton's best days are probably done for. However, I think Everton are the kind of club who will be successfully in the English Premier League for many, 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 many seasons. I think they've got a big enough club, a big enough bank balance, a big enough squad, really good modern stadium. I think they've got excellent fans. I think they're the kind of club that'll probably languish mid-table in the English Premier League, never really being a threat to get into Europe, never really being a threat to get relegated. Whether that's where Alistair Johnston wants to go, I suspect that's probably not the case. I think possibly if one of the top half a dozen clubs in the English Premier League came in for Johnson, that might be a different factor, or a corresponding team from Germany, Italy, Spain, etc. But I don't think Johnston, as brilliant as we think he is, I don't think he's quite reached the levels where an Arsenal or a Liverpool or a Manchester club's going to come for him, or a Real Madrid or Barcelona, etc. Scott DeGaulle, Fergus delivered everything he promised. He made money out of it. He's a legend to me. Yes, I think he did make a profit out of resurrecting Celtic. He didn't hold out for a massive amount of money to have his shareholding and his ownership of the club bought off of him. My memory and understanding of the time was he pretty much handed the club over to Dermot Desmond. He kind of brought Dermot Desmond into the club. That's been in some ways good for Celtic and in many, many ways bad for Celtic. However, it has carried on the fact that Celtic have financially been a well-run club, and after all, from 2000 to 2026, we've won a tremendous number of Scottish titles, doubles, trebles, not achieved European success as we wanted, but 14 out of the last 15 Scottish premierships have been Celtics, and then most of those seasons doubles and trebles. We are financially very, very strong. So unlike many other clubs who haven't really got the ability to say no to big transfer offers, Celtic can turn down 25 million for Engels, as we did in January. We can, if we want to, have the ability to turn down 25 million or more for Johnston. We have got the ability, as we did with Kuhn, and did with Kyogo, and we did with Matt O'Reilly. We have got the ability to say, no, we're not going to sell you now, but we'll sell you in the summer, etc. So that financial security is very helpful to Celtic. It does mean that we can actually reward players who are at the club already with bigger contracts to try and keep them at the club. Wyoming CSC, I think Kyogo was another one who thought the grass was greener away from us. A fair few have made that mistake. I think that's a really, really brilliant point. And I agree with that massively. Kyogo, obviously, his career went down the toilet going to play in French football, didn't really come back at all playing for Birmingham. I think he scored three goals for Birmingham in the season, scored no goals in French football. He's now gone off to Major League Soccer. Maybe the style of football in a Major League Soccer in America, maybe that suits him better. But there have been a lot of players who have left Celtic. Nicholas Kuhn being another one. He's had a pretty awful time crossing Italian football. Matt O'Reilly's not had a great time since leaving Celtic, going to Brighton. Odsonne Edouard, not really the case. A few players obviously have gone on to bigger and better things, Virgil van Dijk being one example of a Celtic player who's gone on to be one of the best players in the world in his position. But there are quite a number of players, you're quite right, Wyoming CSC, who've left Celtic and had a bad time elsewhere. Oops. Just be a second. Kenneth Todd saying Nakamura, Kyogo, or Maeda, pick a 1, 2, 3. Well, for me, if I was picking 1, 2, 3 with those ones, I would go Nakamura first, Maeda second, and Kyogo third. I thought Nakamura was an absolutely magical player. Scored some of the bestest, most favourite goals of all time for Celtic. His free kick against Man United to win the game 1-0. That brilliant curving shot that he scored against Rangers. The goal he scored to win the league for us deep in the game. Some brilliant goals that he scored. Real magical player. Maeda, brilliant player for Celtic. Kyogo, brilliant player for Celtic. He had a couple of very good seasons for Celtic. His last season for Celtic, not such a good season for him. Maybe that was the way that Rodgers was playing him. Maybe the desire to get away from the club was part of it. But I think 3 brilliant players for me. Nakamura 1, Maeda 2, Kyogo 3. But one could also say 1A, 1B, and 1C. In essence, there's such a small gap between the 3 of them. David 67, it's all proportionate in respect to finance and demographics. 5.25 million in Scotland, 60 plus million in England and Wales. I think also one has to also put into that the fact that the TV contract for the English Premier League is massively more than the Scottish Premiership, Scottish football contract. The English Championship contract dwarfs the contract for the Scottish Premiership and the Scottish football massively as well. The football contract for Scotland's leagues are around about 30th in the world. Scotland's footballing TV contract is the same as the American Women's League contract in America. So we're way down the league table in terms of TV contracts. I think that's a large part of it. But you are correct. The population of England is 12 times as much as Scotland. A lot of the big European leagues, Spain, Germany, Italy, obviously those countries are bigger by far than Scotland. And in all those countries, obviously the TV contract massively bigger than what Scotland has or Celtic can get from it, which is why the Champions League is really important for us. Alberto RG, why we're not signing Spanish players? I think probably the reason that we're not signing Spanish players is I don't think many Spanish players fancy coming to play for Celtic. We have had a few over the time. We are supposedly deep in negotiations to bring Hassiem Hassan, who's a French-Egyptian player playing in Spain. We have brought a few players over the years across from Spain. I think it's more just that I don't think Spanish players fancy coming to play in Scotland, rather than at the moment if they're of any real good ability. Johnny Briggs, thank goodness we didn't sign Bowie. It was a lump of wood. I wasn't a big fan of Kieran Bowie. I thought he did a decent job for Hibs. Didn't think he was really that much that good. He's had a pretty decent time in Italian football. He's been quite highly sought after in Italian football. I didn't really think that Celtic was the place for him to come to, and I'm quite happy that we avoided buying him as well. I don't think he really would have fitted into the way that Celtic play. Yes, Henrik Larsson, as you're saying, Alberto RG 73, Larsson Olympic King. Yes, I think Larsson, for me, one of my two most favourite Celtic players of all time, up there alongside Kenny Dalglish. Kenny Dalglish was my absolute childhood hero. When I was a little boy, aged 4 or 5 years old, he was my favourite player when I first started supporting Celtic. Obviously, Larsson coming to Celtic in the late 90s, by which time I was well into my 30s by that point, but certainly I would say that Larsson, my favourite player, or the best player for Celtic, to play for Celtic during my time as an adult. Ken Dalglish, for me, the number one player when I was a child and a teenager. Sligo Boy making a good point. I believe if Kyogo had played well at Celtic, he would have earned a World Cup 2026 place. Yes, I think the fact that Maeda managed to keep his place in the Japanese squad, Hatate had been in the Japanese squad until he had a bit of a poor start to the 2025-26 season. I think the Japanese manager was willing to play players from Celtic. However, I don't think Kyogo's attitude in his final season for Celtic was very good. His performances were rather patchy. Whether that was down to him, whether that was down to the way that Rodgers wanted him to play, probably a combination of the two. Yep, Sligo Boy, George Connolly, the man and the legend. Again, when I first started supporting Celtic back in 71-72 season, when I was 4 going on 5, he was a really, really big, important player for Celtic. Another player a player that came from Fife, which is where I was born and brought up. Quite a sad end to his career. I think there's a documentary on the go about George Connolly's life and kind of where he went after he kind of disappeared from being a footballer. I think he struggled with the sort of pressure of being a famous player, struggled with being in the Goldfish Bowl, of being a Celtic player and a Scotland player. Yep, Roy Aitken, tremendously dedicated, hard-working player. Maybe not the most skillful player, but brilliant attitude. Amazing club man, very adaptable player. Midfield, defence, captain side. Maximised the ability that he had. Great, reliable team player. Great servant to Celtic. One of Celtic's most appearances ever for Celtic as well with Roy Aitken. So lots and lots of good things with him. Philip Ward, Didier Agathe was my favourite player after Larsson. The guy could catch pigeons. Yep, he was. Rather mercurial player, played very well in the Martin O'Neill system, 2000 onwards. Scored some great goals for Celtic, some brilliant assists and crosses and passes for Celtic. Very hard working up and down that wing. Fitted in very well into the Martin O'Neill blueprint of how to play football. Gave good service to Hartson, Larsson and Sutton in the box. Super player. I've got a recollection of seeing Didier Agathe, I think, playing for Raith Rovers when he very first came across to Scotland. He went from them to play for Hibs and then came to Celtic after that. I've got a vague memory of watching Didier Agathe playing for Raith Rovers on a snowy day in Kirkcaldy. Didn't actually look that brilliant playing in the snow in Kirkcaldy, but went on to be a good player at Hibs for about half a season and great player for Celtic for several seasons. And I think a bit of an underrated player. Scott Dougal, forget the money he's earned, but Kyogo made a mistake leaving. He was idolised by the supporters. I think probably in retrospect, Kyogo realised that leaving Celtic was a bad idea. I think he left Celtic thinking that moving on to Rennes would help him get back into the Japanese squad. Obviously, things didn't work out for him in France. He lost all possibility of getting into the Japanese squad. I do think that had he had a good, strong second half to the season, and I think had he stayed at Celtic, he could easily have got into the World Cup squad alongside Dyson Maeda the summer just past. Oops. Scott Dougal saying Didier Agathe is in Glasgow this weekend with a Celtic State of Mind podcasting, YouTube, Facebooking channel. It's interesting. Be quite interesting to see if they do any sort of interview and put it up on social media, if that's the case. Alberto RG fell in love with Celtic because of Larsson's goal. Certainly, he was a big factor in Celtic turning things around late 90s through the 2000s. Came in under Wim Jansen at Celtic for one season, won the title with us. Then he left. Dr. Joe Venglos came in. Then John Barnes and Ken Dalglish came in. Not terribly successful, 2 seasons there. And then, obviously, the rest is history after O'Neill came into Celtic in 2000. Since then, we've been practically unbeatable in terms of Scottish football. Not so much in Europe, but certainly in Scottish terms, Celtic has been the massively dominant club for 26 years. Milky Moo, Celtic saying there's an interview with Agathe on the Frank McAvenny channel. Not watched it yet. Well, there are several ex-Celtic players I don't give any credit or credence or belief in, and Frank McAvenny is one of them. I think 99% of what Frank McAvenny says is complete and utter balderdash and nonsense. He was a pretty decent player for Celtic in his day. I think he had ideas above his station. I think he thought he was a far, far better player than he actually was. And I think he still thinks he's a far, far better player now that he's a retired player for the best part of, 40 years since he played properly for football. I don't actually give very much belief or credence or reliance on what he says as an ex-player pundit. Yes, good. Everybody can have their own opinion. Some people might think that Frank McAvenny is the bee's knees and speaks nothing but good sense. He does seem to be able to get himself into the Celtic news on a very regular basis. He still seems to have carved himself out a position where people pay attention to what he says. I don't really have, I don't really trust him, believe in him, or whatever. But yes, but even so, if Didier Agathe's on the channel, I think I might maybe see what Agathe's saying. It's interesting to see what he's to catch up with him. Wyoming CSC, Sutton's the best guy for Celtic analysis. I think Sutton does speaks an awful lot of sense about football in general. I think sometimes he a bit like Chris Boyd, likes creating, or Robbie Savage. I think they quite often sometimes like creating a bit of controversy and a bit of fighting and stuff amongst pundits and journalists and TV people and stuff. Do think he actually misjudged things quite badly last season. Don't think he analysed the Celtic situation quite as well as he should have done. I think he let his emotions get a wee bit carried away from him. I think he's made one or two ill-judged comments over the summer as well. Gordon Flowers agreeing with me about Frank McAvenny. Mika Baur, I don't think Agat was above his station. He wasn't on his right back. No, I'm sorry if that's how it's come across. I thought Agat was a really good player for Celtic. I think what I was saying above Ali's above his station was more Frank McAvenny, who apparently has been on a podcast with Didier Agat. I thought Agat was a very decent player for Celtic, hard-working player for Celtic, up and down the right side. Good, scored some goals for Celtic, worked very, very hard, fitted into the Martin O'Neill system very, very well. I liked Didier Agat immensely. Sorry for any misconceptions regarding my view. Agat, good player for Celtic in the early 2000s, worked very, very well in the O'Neill system. Was an important player for us in all those titles we won under O'Neill, and in the European run all the way to the UEFA Cup final 20 odd years ago. Johnny Briggs saying Lennon or McStay. For me, Paul McStay, better all-around player. Although Lennon and Lambert massively important in that Celtic team under O'Neill, with Lennon carrying over a bit into the Gordon Strachan years as well. Paul McStay, brilliant player for Celtic. Came in playing for Celtic when he was aged 18. Played well over. He's one of Celtic's most highest appearance players of all time. 600 plus games, I think, for Celtic. Very good player for Celtic, again, similar to a few players. Turned down multiple offers to go and play in England, play in Italy, elsewhere. Was loyal to Celtic his whole time. Then disappeared off to Australia, I think, where he's been living for several years, although he's back. He's back as part of that season ticket holders share purchase type thing. Yes, Sligo Boy, Lennon, dogged, McStay culture. I think both players have lots and lots of good points to their Celtic time. I think Lennon was a very, very important player, as I said, in those Martin O'Neill years, 2000, 2005. We were very lucky to have Lennon and Lambert in the engine room of the midfield, two very good leaders, good captains. Key, yep, Wyoming CSC. Key was another underappreciated player. Again, another player that Celtic bought for a low fee and then sold on for a big profit years down the line. And I do think he was a good player for Celtic. And I think you're quite right, a bit of an underappreciated player for Celtic. But totally agree, Scott Dougal, McStay, a Celtic legend, incredible longevity. So he came into Celtic when he was 17, 18 years old, making his debut, played well into his 30s, was pretty much the first name on the team sheet, stayed loyal to the club throughout all those years, many of which were rather disappointing years. And so an absolute club legend, right up there amongst the greatest players of Celtic's history. Scott Dougal saying, don't want to be controversial, but I'd put McStay up there with Jinky for his novelty. I think both players very loyal to Celtic. Both players gave all their best years of their career to Celtic. McStay obviously stayed the whole time with Celtic. Johnson moved on at the very end of his career when he was rather sore and tired and kicked about. He did have a couple of years away from it with other clubs. And he time down in Sheffield, I think it was, and then he played a bit in America and then retired completely. McStay obviously had the whole of his life at Celtic. Philip Ward saying, would he begrudge Calmac if he wanted away? He certainly said in his interview a day or two ago he was very, very clearly totally committed to Celtic. He was staying at Celtic. He wasn't looking to get away. I got the feeling he was kind of intimating that he's looking to complete this year and next year, which will be the last 2 years of his current Celtic contract. By that point, he's going to be, 34, 35 years old. I don't think at that point he's liable to be that likely to move to any other clubs at that point. Maybe Celtic give him another season at that point, a bit similar to what we've done with James Forrest. Maybe at that point, McGregor moves over into a player coaching role. I had the feeling from his interview he's going to be at Celtic this season and next season, and plans to be at Celtic one way or the other in the longer term once he's retired as well. Alberto RG, do you think Eddie Howe can come for next season? My feeling is that Eddie Howe will be snapped up by whichever English Premier League side sacks its manager first. I think he'll be one of the first 2 or 3 candidates for any jobs that crop up in England over the next 6 months or so. Usually in the English Premier League, within about 3 or 4 months of the start of the season, 2 or 3 managers have been sacked. I can easily see Eddie Howe ending up at one of the whichever of the clubs that sacks their manager first. I don't really see him coming to Celtic. Also, with the way that he treated Celtic, stringing them along for a couple of months of negotiations without any real apparent desire to come to Celtic, I think that actually wasted Celtic a lot of time. In retrospect, had they got in Ange Postecoglou in about 6 weeks earlier, it would have been much better for Celtic all around. Would have got us much better organised for the start of that season. Luckily, Postecoglou did a brilliant job patching things together for the first 3 or 4 months, and then turned that squad into a really good team with the addition of several top quality players like Hatate and Maeda in the winter window halfway through that first season. Wyoming CSA putting forward Roberto Martinez next summer. I think that's possibly more of a likelihood than Eddie Howe. I think possibly we could have had Roberto Martinez as our manager rather than Martin O'Neill, had it not been that Martinez was committed to Portugal for the World Cup. Scott Dougal putting forward Kieran McKenna for next season. It was quite interesting him deciding to resign from his job at Ipswich, having got them promoted back into the English Premier League. There was some speculation that he was being lined up for 2 or 3 other teams in the English Premier League who had a better chance of staying in that league. As yet, he hasn't moved on to any other club. So I think probably in many ways, Kieran McKenna might be a better bet for Celtic if he was the coach we took on next season. In that he's much younger, he's got experience managing in the English Premier League. He is reportedly a big Celtic fan, and Roberto Martinez that wee bit older. Johnny Briggs, not a big fan of Kieran McKenna. As I said, with Kieran McKenna, what he really hadn't demonstrated was an ability to manage at the highest possible level, in that he took Ipswich up to the Premier League and then got relegated straight away. Now, admittedly, he did get them back into the English Premier League and then resigned. So would have been interesting to see if McKenna had stayed on at Ipswich, had he got, maybe would have got them stabilised in the English Premier League. However, he's a young manager. He's had relative success in English football. Has a background, obviously, working in a big club in Manchester United. So a lot of positive points with McKenna, although hadn't really demonstrated the highest level. Alberto RG saying Martinez is the next Spanish team head coach. Well, that's a definite possibility, obviously. He's had a successful time with Belgium, successful time with Portugal. Not quite reached the highest heights with both those two, but had both those countries as top teams in European tournaments, qualified them both for the World Cup, qualified them both for the Euro Nations, got Belgium through several rounds of those competitions, got Portugal through into the knockout phase of the last World Cup. I think Martinez, good experienced manager. Obviously, there's a link with Martinez and Maloney as well. That would be useful at Celtic. I think if Celtic can keep Maloney and Fotheringham McManus as coaches at Celtic in the longer term, whether it's O'Neill as the head coach manager or whether someone else comes in, I think it is important to have Celtic players like Fotheringham, McManus and Maloney staying at the club to be coaches. I think that does help a lot with continuity, moving from one manager to the other. Does help the transition of a new manager coming in. I think it was one of many mistakes that Celtic made when we brought in Wilfred Nancy, was we didn't keep enough of those Celtic coaches in place, in that Fotheringham, McManus and Maloney all disappeared from the first team squad back to their previous jobs. I think it would have been good for two or three of those, or all three of them, to have stayed as key members of the Nancy management team. Happily, the Celtic board and Nicholson, etc., made a very good choice and sacked Nancy at the first opportunity, brought back O'Neill, and the rest is history. We ended the season with a double. Anyway, just to finish off, I think what we should do is, for those that haven't predicted a score already, predicting a score for Monday's game that starts the new season. Quite right, Perry, 8:40, crazy end to the season. I think, as O'Neill kind of alluded to, and Callum McGregor alluded to, quite a lot of people have talked about, when the going got tough at the end of the season, Celtic's players got better and better. The Rangers players, the Hearts players buckled under the pressure, and Celtic came through in the end. So rubber duck going for a 5-0 win for Celtic on Monday. I'd personally be happy with a 2 or a 3 goal win. But I do think if Celtic do get on the front foot, get an early goal, knock Dundee out of their defensive way of playing football, I think Celtic could actually add 2 or 3 goals to the score. Admittedly, last season where we struggled to beat Dundee 2-1 in the league, 1-0 in the league, lost 2-0 in the league, beat them in the cup 2-1. So Alberto RG going for a 2-1. bit of a more conservative role. The goal prediction. Johnny Briggs going for a 5-1, which would apparently give him a lot of pleasure. Yeah. Couldn't agree more. Gordon Flowers' Flag Day on a Monday evening is a joke. There were circumstances that required that, with the Commonwealth Games going on in Glasgow at the same time, and apparently a couple of very big pop concerts at Hampden Park on the same weekend. But I do think it was pretty bad organisation of the Scottish Premier League and Sky Sports. I'm sure they could have worked out some form of compromise along with the Scottish police people. Paul McGuire going for a 4-0. Couple for Kasper, one for Camilo Duran, and one for Engels from the penalty spot. I think if Engels is still at Celtic on Monday, which is what one would expect, I think he has to start the game. I think keep him in the side for as long as he's at Celtic. Maybe the interest in him doesn't come through. Maybe we can keep him for another season or so. I think possibly the possibility of Champions League might be a factor in keeping Engels at the club for another season. He has got 2 years left in his contract, so there is a bit of scope for turning down bids for Engels. Perry 40 would be delighted with 2 or more goals and a clean sheet. Yep, I think clean sheet's quite an important thing. Slagger Boy, Duran plays up front and scores the winner. Hope that's not going to be the case. So hopefully, I'm sure we will have enough backups on the bench not to require our backup goalkeeper to be to come on as a sub, and certainly hope that we don't lose Sinisalo to injury in the first game of the season, because I wouldn't be very keen to have Duran as our #1 goalkeeper for at all this season coming. Thank you, Johnny Briggs, for that positive. Thank you for saying you love the channel. It's been great fun doing the channel for nearly 3 years. It's been tremendous fun doing these live streams for the last year. It's been brilliant that the live streams have got more and more popular, more and more people listening in and contributing and watching and so on. So thank you to everybody who's helped the channel get stronger and stronger. Women's CSC, is Simon Murray still there? My understanding is that Murray is still part of the Dundee squad. They've actually had a lot of players leaving the club over the summer. They actually had quite a few of their players who played especially well for them last season were on loan. So a few of their better players got sold. A lot of the other players who were there on loan obviously went back to their parent clubs. Stephen Presley, their manager, who's just got a new contract with them, has had to make a lot of changes to his squad, a lot of new players coming in. So it'll be quite a different Dundee side that we play on Monday than the one that quite a different Dundee side than the one that we played 3 months ago or so in the 2-1 win at Dens Park that triggered the Celtic charge towards the title. Sligo Boy is saying, I love the channel more than Johnny Briggs. David 67 banned him. I'm not going. I've only banned 2 people in the history of the channel. Hail to you as well, Johnny Briggs, and you're all my favourites. And as I say, I am amazingly happy for so many people to contribute so much to the channel. I'm glad that some people enjoy the channel. I'm glad that some people enjoy the live stream. However, having said all that, it is now almost 1:45 in the morning on Friday, so I think it's probably time to call it a day. Thank you, Scott Douglas. As I always say, you involve the viewers more by reading comments. And like other channels, that's what makes yours good. Well, thank you very much. That certainly is one of the intentions, is trying to get as many voices and many opinions shared amongst Paul Boy 67. I don't recall having blocked you, but if I blocked you or whatever, I do apologise. Thank you, Wyoming CSC again. I have always enjoyed making up quizzes, making up questions. It's something I did do when I was at school, when I was at university, when I was working. It's something I've done for lots of family parties and stuff. So, anyway. And as Rubber Duck 67 says, treble incoming, easy, hail, hail. I'm not convinced that it's going to be easy for Celtic to do the treble this season, but I would quite happily predict at this point, with the players that Celtic got in, with a couple more players that Celtic are on again, really kind of you to say that, Gordon Flowers. Other Celtic channels are all hype. Here we can have a great conversations and no hype or hatred. That certainly is the intention. That certainly is the intention. Yes, Sligo Boy. I did say at one point that there was nothing much to talk about tonight, but there has been plenty as always. Yes, we always find a way to find 3.5, 4 hours of stuff to talk about. As I said, it does frustrate me that Celtic haven't got as many players in by this point as I was hoping they would do. I think we have got 2 players of immense quality into the club. I think that's a massively positive thing. Another positive thing is we still have hold of the bulk of our squad from last season, apart from Maeda, obviously. I'm very hopeful that we can keep the bulk of those top players at the season for for this season as well. Hopefully nobody in the end bids for Engels, nobody bids for Johnston, Nygren, etc. And we can keep them for another season and push forward and get more success in Europe this season than we did last season. So having said all that, I think it's time to call it a day. Not sure if there's going to be a live stream next week because me and Mrs. David 67 are away on our holidays. Not sure how good the internet and Wi-Fi will be at the holiday cottage we're going to be staying at. So I'll keep everybody up to speed the middle of next week as to whether we're having a live stream next Thursday. As I say, if the Wi-Fi and the internet is good at the holiday cottage we're going to be at next week, I'll certainly try and do a live stream next Thursday. If the Wi-Fi and internet's not so good, Mrs. David 67 wants anonymity. Otherwise, I would tell you what her first name is. But both she and my daughter, little Miss David 67, both wanted anonymity. So I'm honouring their wishes. Anyway, yes, getting near to 2,000. That certainly is my target. Is 2,000. And thank you to Gordon Flowers across in Australia. So we'll be doing some videos next week. I'll be doing the quiz questions, etc. next week. And the live stream really depends on how good the Wi-Fi and the internet is at our holiday cottage. Well, holiday leave for me, always on holiday at the moment, but Mrs. David 67 definitely needs a holiday from her job, so that's why we're having a holiday next week. Anyway, so thank you so much to absolutely everything. Everybody who's contributed: Johnny Briggs, Milky Moo Celtic, Sligo Boy, Alberto RG, Paul Boy 67, Clashman Numpty earlier on, Pat McLaughlin, Rubber Duck 67, Gavy Boy, everybody else who's contributed this evening. Too many to mention. As I say, thank you very much for this evening. May or may not do a live stream next week, next Thursday, depending on Wi-Fi and internet on our holidays. Otherwise, we'll be back to normal 2 weeks today with another live stream, when we'll have had a couple of league games, and we'll be looking forward to the European games as well. So good night, hail to you, Paul Maguire, and the rest of the Celtic fans watching the channel, etc. And until the next live stream and the next video, goodbye and hail.